Fair Farms Manual is the testimony of that scope of supporting our growers to make sure that they comply with the complex regulations, fair work regulations, work health and safety regulations, and now some components of the Modern Slavery Act. Thanks for starting the recording, Emily. That's something I forgot. So that everyone knows, we have started the recording. Please let me know if you have any issues. Few important updates. Now, as you know, we have a new decision-making process in place, which includes a public consultation, which includes a technical committee that works on the standards, which includes external stakeholders reference group as well. And we will go through that process shortly. We trialed our new decision-making process last year in 2023. And as a result of that, we have released the new version of the standard, which is version 3. Can all auditing bodies and auditors make sure that 30th January 2024 onwards, all of us use version 3 of the standard rules and guide? Copy of the version 3 is available on the website. If anyone needs reference to the previous versions and a change log or a track change version from version 2 to version 3, please reach out to us. We have started the next review of the standard already, which is the program review number 4. Now, you may be aware of the submission to change the standard that is available on our website. If you have any particular suggestions to change any section of the standard or audit guide or rules, please send us that form and we'll include that in the program review that has started. So the anticipated time frames to complete that program review so that we have the new version of the standard, that's version 4, by October. If you need a copy of the submission, I will include that in the resources that we'll send after this training. I also want to touch base on the ESRG. Some of you are a part of that committee. ESRG is External Stakeholders Reference Group. It's an advisory group that consists of auditing bodies, grower members, retailers, registered buyers, supply chain partners, as well as the QFVG representative and Fair Farms representatives. We will reach out to you for the next review of the ESRG by the end of this year. ESRG is due for renewal and will put out the expression of interest for the ESRG by the end of this year. So if you want to be a part of that ESRG, please send your expression of interest then. Technical committee is separate from the external stakeholders reference group. Technical committee is specifically dedicated to the maintenance and review of the standard. The technical committee consists of 5 members. Number 1, the legal expert in work health and safety. Number 2, a legal expert in fair work and HR, thank you. Number 3, a Fair Farms representative. Number 4, an auditing body representative. And number 5, a grower representative. So those 5 technical committee members and with an independent chair, technical committee is going through those proposed changes to the standard. We will also have the review of the technical committee by the end of this year, as they complete 2 years as a member of technical committee. So those positions will be open for renewal as well by the end of this year. Another update from the program, which is important for the auditing bodies, is we have implemented a new CRM, which includes a structured process to collect data about potential members, monitoring the timeframes between inquiries and the conversion, and specific resources to make sure that we monitor the growth of the program. Before having that CRM, we did not have any systems in place to capture that data. So in last 12 months, some of the updates that we have in the program specifically focus on collection of data, analysis of data, and using that data for growing the program. Next one is the Fair Farms website. I was actually hoping to have that website launch today, but as all of you know how website reviews go, unfortunately, we don't have a website ready for launch today. However, we are going to launch the new website in next few weeks. Now, why new website? In my opinion, our current website does not reflect the changing nature of the program. It does not give enough information about the context of the program. It does not give enough information about generic concepts like social compliance, ethical sourcing, modern slavery, and how those concepts are relevant for the Fair Farms program. So we are trying to put that together in the new website. We have sought feedback from everyone about the website. If you have any creative ideas to improve this any further, please let us know. Fair Farms Manual was launched after the previous auditor training in April. Fair Farms Manual was launched in May, and since then, approximately 70 members have benefited from buying the manual. The Fair Farms Manual is a wonderful resource with 70 plus templates for policies, procedures that will help small growers who do not necessarily have a dedicated HR department or a workplace relations quality system. So if you're not aware of the details of the manual, and if you want to have a glimpse of it, please let us know. And also, if you know someone who may benefit from that when you're auditing, please inform them about this important resource that may help them. The next one is the Fair Farms Audit Checklist Portal. We talked about it at the last auditor training, and it's been in progress since then. There have been quite a few revisions that we have done to make sure that the new checklist fits the purpose, particularly including the multiple sites that we have and how to incorporate those different checklists in that portal. So we're going to go through that portal shortly anyway. Another important update when I talk about the training and support is Fair Talk. Now, Fair Talk is a half an hour talk show every first Wednesday of every month from 12 to 12:30. Now, the purpose of Fair Talk is not just to give the information to people about different concepts like fair work and farmers' mental health or labor hire licensing. It is to get some insights into those different concepts. Our first Fair Talk had the Victorian Labor Hire Licensing Commissioner, who talked about how the framework is working in Victoria and how we can get some insights into that licensing, particularly for the labor hire provider certification. The second fair talk was with Fair Work Ombudsman Steve Ronson, and he gave some wonderful insights specifically for horticulture sector, unannounced inspections, the outcome of unannounced inspections, and their targets going forward. You can watch those episodes on our website anytime, but I would highly recommend you to register for our Fair Talk episodes on an ongoing basis. It's half an hour, bite-sized insights into the current topics that will benefit you as an auditor. You can also send questions in advance if you want to ask questions to the guests. We compile those questions and include those as a part of the talk show. Amanda, who is a workplace relations specialist, is the host for that show. And if you have any ideas about a guest that we should have on a Fair Talk episode, please let us know. Next update is about the pilot projects. We started pilot projects in the Barossa, and we are progressing well. Obviously not at the speed I expected it would go, but we are moving and progressing slowly with that pilot project. We are working with a few big registered buyers where we can put the certification and auditing framework in a group structure. So there are some pilot projects in the pipeline, and I will be contacting the auditing bodies when there is a concrete update about providing the auditing services to those big groups. Next one is about the auditor competence framework. We, in last 12 months, we have increased our capacity and resourcing to monitor the quality of the audit reports that we receive. We check each and every audit report that we receive before we issue the certificate. We assess and review the audit reports for completeness and adequate information. And if the audit report is not as per the standard expected in the audit guide and rules and standards, audit reports have been denied, and we're expecting auditing bodies to send the updated audit reports. There are two more updates that are not on this agenda. Number one is the observation audits that are going to happen going forward. Observation audits for auditors as well as auditing body audits in the financial year starting from 1st of July. So we will have approximately 12 observation audits across the board to assess the competence of auditors to provide auditing services for the Fair Farms program. So that's 1st of July onwards. We are also planning to have a half-day audit of the auditing bodies. That is to confirm that the existing quality systems that auditing bodies have comply with the requirements of the Fair Farm program, including the agreement that we have in place. Talking about the auditing body agreement, that is under review as we speak. And for some of you, I have already seen the extensions to the existing agreement. The reason is the auditing body agreement is under review. So you will hear from us soon. That will have a few clauses removed that don't make sense in the current agreement, and there may be a bit of a clarity on our expectations from the auditing bodies. Another announcement I have today is we are now the signatories to the Memorandum of Understanding with APSCA. Now we are one of those, I think, 13 organizations who are part of their collaborative program working group, CPWG, and we'll be working closely with APSCA under that MOU. And the purpose of that MOU is to agree to work together to sharing information and improve the auditing in social compliance. Those are the few updates from the Fair Farms program. Any questions so far? Great, thank you. Before I move on to the numbers, Amanda, can you please help me for 2 minutes? I'll have a glass of water and I'll continue. This is about the numbers, if you can just start.
If you can turn off the boardroom mic, and I will.
Sure.
Good morning, everybody. Hoping everybody. Thanks, Alistair. Can everybody hear me? I think it should be good. Thank you. So we've got some fabulous numbers in regards to we've got 718 sites which are controlled by 454 members. So they're our current registered and active members that are in the system who are currently financial and are participating in the program certification pathway. So, you know, there's just about 1.6 sites, roughly, if we were to average that out. What that means is that we're actually touching the lives of around about 18,000 workers within the program. So, you know, we've got a significant ability to be able to impact good behaviours on farm and improved compliance in that respect with having those sorts of numbers. We've currently got 292 fully certified sites, which is wonderful. We've had a really great increase lately. In the last 6 months, we've increased our numbers by 16%. So we've seen some really good movement there, and uncertain as to whether that uptake is due to the complex changes that have come through from the HRIR spaces with government lately, or whether it's the fact that we've been out and been nice and active in the marketplace to discuss Fair Farms memberships. As Sachin said earlier, we've had nearly 70 people purchase the Fair Farms manual, which is a fee-for-service document. It will be added to on a regular basis and at minimum annually when there is the national pay rate changes, etc. But that's a simple one-off fee for growers. There's not an ongoing charge and there's not any additional charges. So as we add resources, whether that's codes of practice, etc., in that respect, then those members who have purchased that will continue to get those updates as we go. Sachin, back.
Thank you.
Back.
All right, just to put those numbers in perspective, and this is an important information for auditing bodies, we have had 38% growth in certified members. What that means for you is obviously more audits, 17% growth in the registered active members, and 28% growth in the number of sites. I think this is important because obviously you need to plan for individual sites than just the number of members. So 38% in certified growers, so we've issued approximately 300 certificates, 17% in the number of active members, and 28% increase in the number of sites registered. And as you can see, recently, Queensland has taken over New South Wales in terms of the highest numbers of active members under Fair Farm. Okay, now since the last auditor training, these are the numbers. So 104 new businesses added. When I say businesses, it's the active members, 184 sites. 84 businesses have completed the training, 332 OSAs and 114 audits completed and 116 certifications issued. Now, you may see quite a bit of increase in the number of OSAs completed, trainings completed, because we have a dedicated resource. That's Emily, who follows up on the new members for OSA, renewal OSAs, and trainings. So she will make sure that before you get access to the Fair Farms file for a particular grower, that they're ready for audit, they have paid their membership fee, they have completed their training as required. I've already talked to you about external stakeholders reference group, and as I said, I will encourage people who are attending this training to consider being a part of that reference group, so that we have that valuable input from people who are heavily involved in making sure that Fair Farms program is implemented correctly. Again, look out for the expression of interest by the end of this year. Technical committee, dedicated committee for maintenance of the standards. Now, this has one position for the auditing body representative. And we'll reach out to you when there's a review. Now, this is the decision-making flow chart. My apology for a pixelated flow chart, but I hope you can see that. This decision-making process was implemented last year, and version 3 that you see is the result of this decision-making process that we have followed. Now, as you can see, anyone can apply for changes in the standards, including auditors, members, non-members, general public. And these are the steps we go through before we make any change in the standard. When we put out the public comments, I would also encourage auditors and auditing body personnel to put your inputs into those changes, because those changes are definitely going to impact the way you operate. In the last 12 months, we have 2 new auditing body approved under the Fair Farms program, BSI and Meriu. Welcome, BSI and Meriu. Both APSCA members, and we have assessed the quality systems in compliance with the requirements of the Fair Farms program. Important notification of a change to the application of Fair Farms Auditor Competency Framework. Now, Fair Farms Auditor Competency Framework currently sits outside the Fair Farms Standard Rules and Guide. And we have published that separately. If you want to know more about that and want to have a copy, please let me know. Now, there is this important change that happened on 30th of November last year, that Fair Farms program, until further notice, will not accept any applications to approve new auditors who do not have the CSCA status. How's that different from the previous requirement? The previous requirement was APSCA ASCA with 150 days of auditing, or APSCA ASCA with experience in horticulture and other compliance programs. However, 30th of November onwards, it's only CSCAs. What happens to the auditors that were in the system when this notification came out? We are constantly checking with the auditing bodies so that the ASCA auditors who were approved as a part of the previous framework progress to at the next CSCA level. So if you have any updates on that after this session, please let us know. As I mentioned before, monitoring of the audit reports. Out of 114 audits conducted, unfortunately, we had to reject 12 audit reports. And there are multiple reasons. Number one, incorrect information. Number two, inadequate information. Number three, copy and paste from other audit reports. Number four, incomplete sections of the checklist. Number five, incomplete details about the sites visited. Number six, conducting audits when it's not peak season. These are just few examples I'm giving. There are multiple reasons why we would decline an audit report. As a part of our monitoring and review of the audit reports, unfortunately, we had to take a decision to suspend one auditor. Moving on. How does the next 12 months look like? Oh, sorry. I'm jumping on to the next one already. Sorry. Oh, yes, sorry. But it says next 12 months.
That was last year's.
Yeah, okay, right. Ongoing systems. Now everyone knows that I don't do my slides. Thanks, Amanda. Should have gone to Specsavers. Ongoing systems improvements, including Auditor Portal. Look, although I have ticked it, we are going to launch it officially after the exercise that we complete. We are there, so I would say it's partially complete. We are getting there. National reach with state representatives. In the last training, we talked about state representatives in every state. However, we have changed the way we look at that. We may not have the state representatives going forward. We are going to focus more on our internal capacity than having state representatives working with external organizations. Third one is the annual program review. As you know, the new system is implemented, the new version is released. Fourth one is structured communication and engagement campaigns. Now, particularly for auditors, I hope all of you receive a dedicated publication that's called Auditorial. And we are trying to have as much information as we can in that particular publication. So if you haven't got access to that, please let us know. And we are trying to send the updates for auditors and auditing bodies in that particular newsletter. Expanding the scope of the program, obviously having LHP in the scope, and other sectors like nursery and other broader agriculture sectors has started. And improvement in the uptake of the program. Although we have ticked that as done, it's an ongoing process, as you know. So welcome your feedback on those ongoing improvements that we have for the uptake of the program. Okay, what exactly have we done? As I said, demonstration for the new checklist will be there, LHP certification. Now, I'll give you a little bit of background about LHP certification. Version 2 of the standard had staff sure as an acceptable LHP certification under Fair Farms. Now, we understand that staff sure is not an independently audited or verified certification program. So, as a part of the program review, we have decided to have our own framework for the labor hire provider certification. What that means is the reference to the staff sure has been removed from the standard. So when we are ready with our auditing checklist and the framework on the login portal and the application, which is the next few weeks, we will actively start promoting the certification for LHPs. What we're going to do today is to go through a part of that framework, which is the auditor checklist for the LHP certification. Communication and engagement. Obviously, we talked about newsletters and Fair Talk, but conference. Now, over the last 2 years, we have progress with diverse topics in that conference platform. So this year, the conference is on 11th of October in Brisbane. So I will encourage auditors and auditing body personnel to attend that. Expanding the scope of the program, labor hire, viticulture, nursery. Now, when we say expanding the scope, now this expansion of scope is explicitly stated in the standard. So that's another change we had in the version 3 of the standard. Non-audit pathway. Now, we'll talk a little bit about that and what it includes and why it is important for auditing bodies. Now, non-audit pathway is for growers who do not necessarily need an audit at this point of time. What that means is if your retailer has not asked you to go through a social compliance program, however, you want to be ready for the future requirements by your retailers, non-audit pathway is a wonderful way to get used to the non-audit pathway. Sorry, Amanda.
Plus for those who supply central market.
Correct. So people who are not supplying the major retailers or supplying central markets, this is a wonderful way to get involved in the program. Now, there are multiple benefits. Number one, you can use non-audit pathway to complete the online self-assessment and have that risk analysis for your business. Now, with the non-audit pathway, as you can see on the screen, participants register, same process up to point 12. So when you complete the training and you want to pause there and you don't want the third-party audit, you can pause there. When you're ready, it's very easy to switch over to the audit pathway, depending upon the timeframes between where you have stopped and where you want to start. Rest of the requirements for non-audit pathway are the same. For example, they still need to go through the annual OSA. They still need to complete the required trainings. The only difference is not progressing to the next level, which is auditing. We are also going to include in the OSA the requirement to attach the documents. So at the moment, the OSA does not, the Fair Farms OSA does not require participants to attach documents for particular questions. But the non-audit pathway participants will have to provide the documents to support the answers on the online self-assessment. And there will be a review happening, and they will receive that risk analysis at the end of that process. Any questions so far?
It's going to be the incentive for farmers to do the non-audit pathway.
It's putting the system in discipline, first of all. Number two, having that risk analysis to see where the gaps are and where you want to improve. And when you're ready, you don't have to go through the entire process again. You're ready to go to audit.
I think if I can add my 2 cents worth there as well, thanks for the question, Jamie, is that it's really important that businesses out there, growers, etc., might need additional resources or someone to lean on. And we know that a lot of farmers out there don't have a dedicated HR department or anything along those lines. Often a lot of them don't have a huge amount of paperwork in regards to their hiring of staff or their work health and safety. So we feel that by opening up membership to those businesses who don't necessarily supply the retailers, we're able to wrap our arms around a wider number within the industry to help elevate practices within the industry. So we're a very affordable membership to be able to access the resources that they wouldn't normally be able to access at a reasonable price. So I think from what's the benefit of joining us, they can pick up the phone, they can ask what's the level 1 pay rate, they can ask us to cast our eye over a payslip to see if it's a compliant kind of payslip. It's that training and support mechanism that we can provide to them, as well as access to the monthly webinars, the newsletters, etc., to be able to increase that learning without, and particularly for those growers who then don't need to be supplying it from a mandated point of view for the retailers.
So yes, adding to that, access to manual, the Fair Farms manual, that is exclusive for members. So you don't have to go through the auditing pathway if you want to obtain the Fair Farms manual. Okay, I think I'm a bit over time. Time-saving benefits and stuff of the checklist, it's self-explanatory, but I would really want your feedback. If it's not working, what's not working? And one of the important, the purpose of this new checklist is to increase efficiencies. Not only for us as the scheme owner, but also for you as the auditing body, as well as auditing body personnel. This is going to remove few hurdles, particularly the manual process that's currently involved, uploading this and that, communication between Fair Farms and auditing body, particularly in terms of uploading audit reports and delays in issuing certificates. So that's what we're hoping for. And if it's not working, we would like to know straight away so that it makes it easier for everyone. Wow, the 7 key benefits of the new checklist. And now, I don't know how many of you actually use a tablet or iPad. Anyone?
Well, I do, but of the portals I use.
So how it's going to, anyone uses tablet or iPad for Fair Farms audit? No, okay, because the range of things that you can use on iPads or tablets that will make it easier for you to upload the photos and stuff like that. Then easy interface for multi-site business. Now, we have received feedback about the complexity of the current auditing checklist, particularly for multiple sites. I would say the framework that we have put together will remove that complexity, and it will be easier for auditors to have multiple sites audited at the same time, and you can have non-compliances for individual sites recorded adequately. Access to the OSA. Now, so far, auditors did not have access to the online self-assessment results. Now, the new release of this portal will have online self-assessment accessible to auditors.
Can I just interrupt? Can we just address Colin? Colin, we can see you walking down the street. Would you mind? It looks like it's lovely weather where you are. Hello? walking in the car. might like to switch off the video.
Because we can't from here.
No, we can't from here.
We could
Maybe
kick him.
can we kick him off?
Yeah.
And then, sorry, Colin.
Oh,
Here we are.
There we go.
Okay. So yes, access to the OSA for auditors, that will be a new feature that you will have on your portal when when we release the new version. No duplication. And the final version of the audit report as a result of this new portal will be clearer and easy to read and understand, not only for auditors and us, but also for growers or the client. Because at the moment, I believe the format is a bit clunky when they get the synopsis of the audit. So we are also going to go through a bit of a snapshot of how that audit report looks like. We talked about labor hire provider framework. I won't go through further details that are on the screen. But as I said, there are three important components of that framework. Number one is changing things in the standard, which we have done. Second one is the application and OSA for labor hire provider, which is being worked on at the moment. And number three is the auditing checklist. So we are going to go through that third component today. And the only component that's left is the online application and OSA for LHPs. You will notice when we launch that, their LHPs are required to provide lots of documents as a part of their registration and online self-assessment. They also have a different pricing structure and framework in terms of auditing. So we are collecting lots of data for this new certification scope. Next 12 months, labor hire provider audits to be undertaken. Number two, we are working on training modules for workers. At the moment, our excuse me, our current training modules are for growers, auditors, supply chain. However, we do not have training modules for workers that growers can provide when they start the induction. So that's something we have in the pipeline. International benchmarking, having an MOU with APSCA is one thing, but we are also starting an international benchmarking for the Fair Farm standards. So we'll let you know the update for that. Guidance documents for Australian standards. There was a particular notification about how we deal with the references of Australian standards in the Fair Farm standard. So there will be more guideline documents in terms of what we are expecting auditors to collect as a part of reference for the Australian standard. For example, the location map requirements as per the Australian standards are mentioned in the Fair Farm standard. However, we are not expecting growers to buy that Australian standard. So if we have mentioned that in the standard, we have to provide guideline documents for growers as well as auditors to set the expectations and what we're expecting in terms of complying with that requirement. So there will be more guideline documents for the Australian standards mentioned in the Fair Farm standard. Guess what? That's the end of my slide deck. Any questions so far? There are quite a few things happening here at the program. Connect with us on LinkedIn. Provide us feedback. If you have any questions, any issues with the checklist or the overall framework, we would like to hear. So I'll stop there and we may take 4 to 5 minutes break and we'll be back at 11:15 Queensland time. Just a quick 5 minutes break. Yeah. Is everyone okay with that? All right, 11:15 it is then. We'll be online. Thanks.
Hello, Judy speaking. Good, thanks.
Good morning. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. The intent of this next section is to make it as interactive as possible and to demonstrate the online functionality of the audit checklist. As you would all know, that this has been under construction for quite a period of time now. We've had a couple of auditors take some time to have a look so far, and feedback has been pleasing. So I'd like to run through things with you today, and this will solve, or this will provide a twofold purpose. Number one, we'll have a look at actually how to use it in an online capacity. And number two, it will hopefully answer, as we answer as a group and populate the findings, observations, etc., it should provide a basis of what our expectation is in regard to levels and detail within the reports. So we've been often asked for a gold standard report or a report that people could base as best practice. So instead of writing something and then providing that, I'd like us to take the time to do that together. It will provide a peer-to-peer learning situation as well. And if there's any areas within the report that need clarification, today's a perfect opportunity to be able to ask those questions. So I'll just see if this online link wants to work for me. It does, but it's not sharing through the screen. Just give me 2 minutes. I'm just going to mute the microphone for 1 second while we sort this. Thank you. Okay, and we're back. Thanks very much. So what I've done is we've logged in, and a few of the auditors will have had access, and they will have had a number of test sites allocated to them. Today, in the case study that you will have received, it's for a business called Smith & Co Enterprises. As you can see on the portal here, Smith & Co is already set up in here. So they will have joined Fair Farms as a business. They will have registered their 5 controlled sites. And we can see that we have allocated them to Ausqual as an auditing body. When we open this up from an audit perspective, which is exactly the same mechanisms that the auditors will do on site on the day, you'll click on your little edit button. And we can see here that in the audit report, we've got pre-populated data. So number one, there's going to be a massive time saving for auditors. There's going to be less errors and administration time spent on creating the checklists. And you'll be able to detail here all of the controlled sites. So you should know that from the audit plan, which has been agreed to prior to going out on site, that the 5 controlled sites here today are going to form part of the audit. You'll be able to validate that the crops are correct, and you'll be able to see as an auditor the online self-assessment, the status of it, whether it's been completed and the expiry date, and this little button down here, you'll be able to download that. Now, in best practice, you would review that online self-assessment. It might help provide you some areas of focus where you might like to concentrate your efforts on, particularly if there are some answers that might be a cause for concern. You'll also see the enrolled courses, and these training modules are what will have been generated and allocated when the business has completed that online self-assessment. So we can see here now that John Smith from this business has actually not started any of these courses, and this is what was identified as his training needs. Now, should he have commenced but not finalised, instead of saying not started, it would say in progress, and if they were completed, it would detail that they were completed. Now, we, as a general rule of thumb, have put a mechanism and an automation in place that as an auditing body is requesting access to a site, that site can't be granted access to the auditing body until such time as training has been finalised. We really want to try and put that roadblock so that the business has the best opportunity of performing well at audit. Plus, they actually have a designated pathway to actually move through to be able to have a successful audit. So we want to ensure that the businesses followed the certification pathway as to which it's been designed and has been able to have time to embed those business practices. So this is all of the data that you will see, which will then fill in to pre-populate the report. You'll be able to see on here whether they've got full-time, casual, English as a second language workers, whether they're using labour hire providers, part-time, peak seasons, etc., if there's any youth workers on site, and any transport or accommodation provided. Wherever there's a little arrow on the left-hand side, that will provide a drop-down for you. So you'll be able to see who the auditor is. That will actually have an auditor's name in there. You'll be able to pop your APSCA number in, should that be required, the date of the audit, the start time of the audit, the sample size of the interview and of that you'll be conducting on site, and then the payroll sample size. As we know, that can vary day to day dependent on the accuracy that's provided in the audit plan. The section that we see below here is the comments. This is just for internal comms. So this is when an auditor might be saying to the auditing body, finalised, just waiting, you can have a little review of this. The audit, it's an internal communication mechanism that stays inside the report. It's not shown to the business when the report is generated. It is strictly between the auditor, the auditing body, and Fair Farms. If there's any further clarification needed, if there's a review, if there is a request for further information. So it's all housed in that one repository. Any questions so far? I can't see. Sorry, I apologise. I actually can't see within that Teams screen. So if there are any questions, can someone, Sachin, can you manage that for me, please?
Sure.
Dara,
has asked a question.
Can we use the section? There's a question from Gaurav.
Yep.
Can we use the section for reporting any sensitive information here?
Yes, absolutely. It's within a closed environment, so yes, you certainly can. Thank you, Gaurav. So this follows the standard format. For those of you who are used to using the current Excel spreadsheet, this follows the same formatting. So we haven't adjusted things too much, so the learning curve won't be too steep. And we just simply click down on the drop box down here, and we can follow through in the required format. So was full access given to all records during the audit? We've contained auditor guidance notes, and you'll be able to see the little arrow that's pointing down in this section here. So if you're needing to understand what the question is really detailing, you'll be able to see that detailed information under each subsection. The site codes, the controlled site codes that you see at the top of each question are where the benefits come into the reporting functionality for multi-site businesses. Now, as an example, and we can use our case study, we don't detail in here, but we've gone with the assumption that the site has given us full access to all records on site on the day. So we're going to say, does it conform? It conforms. Is there a finding alert? No. Was full access given to all workers during the audit? Full access is provided to all workers. Does it conform? Yes, it does. Is there a finding alert? No. Was full access given to all sites? So you can see we follow the same flow. There's a conform or not conform for each section. Should there be a finding, and we will detail this soon, should there be a finding, we'll be able to enter that data in. Is everybody following so far? Yep, great. Was the site in production? We know that we do turn up sometimes and that there might be 5 controlled sites, for example. In this case study here, we've got that there are 5 controlled sites. 2 have got greenhouses, 1 has got a packing shed and a growing area, and the other 2 are large growing sites as well. So was the site in production? We can come back and obviously answer this at the end of the audit as well to ensure that we've been able to access and validate that information as we go through the audit. Does it conform? Yes, it does. Does the business hold a copy of all of the licenses, permits, insurances, etc.? So you can see here, it's very simple, it's very easy. If we're going to be writing information in, then we would be detailing in the findings. We can be saying that, that yes, we have received, and I'm not sure, yes, you can see that on my screen, received copies of, and now this one's referring to work covers insurance, work cover certificate of currency, whatever that number might be. So we would anticipate that we're going to see all data incorporated in these. So the answers that I answered first, sorry, I should just go back to that. Was access granted to all sites? Yes, full access given to all properties listed. Yes, Jamie.
Just to clarify, so findings is not a finding, it's just a detail of what you're seeing, even if it conforms.
Yes, it's what you have found on site. I suppose there's 2 schools of thought, and I'm happy to discuss where we think that might be best practice moving forward. Because we have got something detailed as a finding, we do have an observation as well. In our current audit reports, we list everything in the one area as findings, whether it be that full access was granted, whether it was that the property and all workers were able to be interviewed, etc. It's not raised as a finding unless it's a non-conformance, of course. So you're able to detail, yes, full access was granted. Does it conform? Yes, it does. There are certain instances where you may raise an observation throughout the audit, and that would be popped into the observation areas. And that would be either A, good practice that you'd like to reinforce on farm, where the audit doesn't always have to be portrayed through a negative lens, or alternatively, it could be something that you notice and you discuss with the business where if there isn't an intervention soon, it may actually be a finding. Now, that might be something along the lines of close expiration on first aid certificates or licenses about to expire, or perhaps, pallet racking that may have been installed 11 months ago but may be coming up for a compliance check, etc. So you may want to make those notations in there as observations, and they can be positive or negative. We certainly do encourage positive feedback for businesses as well. Sorry, thank you. Sachin, are you managing questions for me, please? Michael has a question?
Yeah, I do. So just to clarify that point on findings, so even though you say, yes, it conforms in that section, you still require under that findings heading to say, yes, full access was provided?
Yes, absolutely. We wish not to see any blank fields in any section of the report. Number one, we know then it hasn't been missed. And number two, I think when providing the report to the business at the end of the day, they are going to appreciate the fact that you've gone to the effort to say, yes, full access was given to all properties listed, or whatever the case might be. So even though that, yes, you could think that whilst it conforms, you don't actually need to detail any data in there, we would like to see information put in there for each section.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
There's another question from Janet. Can we attach photographic evidence or not?
Yes, you can. Yeah, thank you for that. So, for example, we would then go through and attach a file. Now, this is where I think the tablet or iPad compatibility will be really beneficial. You may be able to snap a picky on the spot with an iPad or a tablet and then upload it directly. Alternatively, you'll be able to, and I'm just looking at that from an efficiency point of view as an auditor on site. My assumption is that you would take the photographs via phone and then you would upload those to the computer and then you would attach those to the file. So you can still utilise that workflow in this regard as well. It has the ability to attach the files, photographic evidence, videos, or documents, whatever it is that you'd like to put in there, you will be able to attach. So instead of it being photographs at the end of the audit report, you will be able to then detail exactly what non-conformance that evidence is based on.
Okay, and the other question is, when you're actually taking pictures, it's better not to take photographs of people's faces for privacy reasons?
Absolutely, yes. Unless explicitly, unless you have explicit permission that it's completely fine, but I would think it best practice not to have any individual person identifiable.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you, you're welcome. Thank you for the question. So we can see that should there be a finding, and we'll go through this a little bit, just from a function point of view, each finding area has the ability to attach evidence. Each corrective action, when the corrective actions are provided back to the auditing body, they will be detailed in here and then the evidence attached. The status will be able to be open or closed. If it's still remaining open, maybe perhaps only partial evidence has been received. If it's closed, and the date that the evidence received, we can drop down from a calendar.
There's a question.
Yes.
Wonderful question. Is there a size limit for file?
Great question. I'm going to say no, because if we're able to upload video, I think as long as we're not sort of taking a 15-minute, we certainly don't expect you to run an an emergency eye wash shower for 15 continuous minutes and video the whole lot. We anticipate that you can time that to ensure that it's operating actively. So I don't envisage that you're going to be uploading too many megabytes. The greatest thing I would consider would be some kind of video component, and I don't think that necessarily would be too long. It might be a demonstration. It might be someone operating a forklift, for example, who's not licensed, or however it might be. But no, as far as I'm aware, there's been no advice to me about file limitations. I will check that, and I will pop it into an email as a frequently asked questions for everybody once I've found that info out.
There's another question from Gaurav. Do you want to, you've also got a hand up, so Gaurav, do you want to ask that question, or is it the same question in the chat box?
Yeah, Amanda, my question is, do we need to add the comments and the non-conformance together in the same section or area?
The comments and the non-conformances, sorry?
Yes, yes.
Well, you would put your findings or your non-conformances, and depending, if it were observations and things of a positive nature, you're certainly welcome to put them in observations. If they are strictly comments and there are no non-conformances, then yes, you can stick them in the findings section, because really, as far as it goes, it's what you've evidenced on site. Either what you have evidenced conforms or what you have evidenced does not conform. And that I suppose is where we detail that conformance in the drop down at the top of the section. Does that answer your question, Gaurav? Sorry.
Yeah, to some extent, yes. But like, for example, if there are 5 emergency exits in the factory, and yes, one of them was locked on the day. So definitely we'll describe
Excellent. Yes,
everything.
and that's the purpose of wanting to try and weave this case study in with it, as to what information are we going to put through in which sections, and come to some sort of general consensus as to what the expectation and reality would look like for auditors in the field.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Great.
Thanks so much.
So if we just move through these basic questions quite quickly, was all full access given to other sites? We don't have any other question section, do we?
No.
No, okay. Everything conforms.
Just a comment.
Yes.
Joe, need to ask for video as well as pics permission.
Yes, absolutely. We should be getting permission from that as soon as we step on site. I think at the management meeting, and perhaps they might detail that there is certain areas of exclusion that they don't want photographed. So obviously you'll be respectful of that. But other than that, photographs I think are wonderful for businesses to understand exactly what non-conformances may be identified as well. So was the site in production? Yes. I would generally expect that there's going to be information, but I'm only skipping through this to be able to then start breaking down some different detail. You'll see that the same question here as above. Does the site hold copies of all valid business licenses, permits, insurances? Well, this particular one in the guidance notes referring to work cover insurance. Same question, might be a bit confusing. Happy to seek your feedback. This section in B is regarding public liability insurance. Would you like to see it being very prescriptive, where question A is saying, does the site hold copies of work cover insurance? Yes or no? Does the site hold copies of public liability insurance? And then you're detailing the policy number, etc., in the findings area. Everyone is happy that we amend. Can you make a note of those, please, Em, as we go through and what the changes are? So we are able to make changes on the fly to this audit report. So hence the purpose of us all trying to go through this today so that we can get a product that everybody's happy to be using.
It's being audited.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Yes, and as a general rule of thumb, Jamie, I think we see great audit reports where each work cover policy is detailed with a policy number and expiry date, certificate of currency, public liability, policy number, expiry date. So often they will come through in full detail in audit reports, all popped in that one Excel sheet. But sometimes there might be an expired public liability, for example. But so where do you raise that non-conformance, etc.? Effluent discharge, we've got water licenses, water usage rights. So we'll make those amendments over the next day or so to detail those documents. If we're moving down into property, is there a property map indicating where workers operate and any relevant infrastructure? So if we start referring to our case study, we find that we've ended up at a mixed farming operation somewhere in Victoria that has got 5 independent sites. The farm owner is John Smith, and the farm manager's name is Jake Johnson. And they pay people underneath the Horticultural Awards. So if we just kind of set the scene where we're going there, can anybody tell me if they've read whether there has been a property map indicated anywhere within the case study? No? No. We're going to assume that there is, so we'll just say that does conform. And we do know that the property map is not the same as an evacuation map. We do know that the property map is going to be detailing at a bare minimum production areas, growing sites, farm buildings, packing facilities, any accommodation on site. It does have a different purpose than a fresh care property map. So rather than just simply saying that it equals M1.4 of the fresh care standards, that does not necessarily mean it meets the Fair Farm standards. So if we can just be mindful of fresh care references in there, because we don't do an alignment exercise when we're reading through audit reports. So property map in full detail. Property map in full detail supplied contains all relevant information. Now, this is one where we obviously come up with a number of businesses who have, they may have a policy, but it may not necessarily be on display. So whilst it's wonderful to be in a handbook, etc., if that handbook's not readily available, say, for example, in a communal area like a staff kitchen or something like that, or that individual policy is not put up in an office wall or the pack shed or wherever it might be, I think display is the key word here. Staff need to understand that a policy is there to be adhered to. So the key is that it's accessible to workers. Does the site have policies about maintaining cooperative and consultative approaches, etc.? Yes, it conforms, and away we go. So I'd like to move down through now, instead of going through question by question. What's going to be important about seeing a multi-site situation here is where we're going to get to our physical sites. Interesting. Does anybody want to have any clarification on anything so far in regards to filling in data, for me to have a look and drop down any further arrows? I know I'm scrolling very fast, but I'm trying to get to an area where we can detail through.
Just going back to this videos versus photos.
Yes.
What's the expectation from Fair Farms in terms of what would you expect to see in terms of video, even if it's just a 30-second video first versus, let's say, a photo?
I think an eye wash is relevant. Seeing an emergency eye wash being operated is relevant. We know that we've read through some audit reports, and whilst there might be one there, the ability to be able to turn on that eye wash and the nozzles actually working have been impaired beforehand. So whilst you might see that there's an emergency eye wash on site, unless they're tested. So I think that testing, either in photograph or video, is fine if there's water coming out of it. We would expect, obviously, that then there's some adequate testing done from a time frame point of view. Well, that's a good question. I suppose really the question can be reframed as, where is it best practice to use video? Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Sonia's made a comment. Sorry, I can't see the comments from where I am. Sachin, can you help me out?
Is the expectation that we record comments such as no corrective actions and no additional observations, or should they remain blank?
Well, the corrective actions field is to be populated once there is a recorded finding and the corrective actions have been submitted to the auditing body. Does everybody agree with that? Can I just have a thumbs up on the screen that everyone's happy with that, that we don't need to put corrective actions in? And as an auditor, it probably would border on consultation if you were to specifically advise a business on what the corrective actions were to close that out. You can provide examples of what businesses have perhaps maybe done before, but if I think it's advisable not to be leaning into a consultative role. Certainly you can provide some guidance around the matter, or maybe point them in the right direction as to where to seek and what to look for. So that corrective actions area strictly is for the auditing body administrators. Or alternatively, if the auditors receive the corrective actions themselves once that's been received.
I'll first go to Michael, who has his hand up, and then we'll go to the comment.
Yeah, Amanda. So I'm just getting back to the findings heading. In my mind, and I would like to get other people's opinion on this as well, but the findings heading, that is, in my mind, should be listed as a finding. At the moment, you're putting in other compliant evidence in there. So my only comment would be that, can you include the term findings and or evidence or something like that, or have another cell to include evidence?
And sorry, so when you're talking about evidence, Michael, can you explain to me what you'd like to see? Can you put some words around that, what that would mean?
So you know how we have to include, right, you have to comment in the findings box for everything that conforms. So a finding is something that's not compliant. My comment here is that you're basically writing in what conforms in the actual findings box. So I guess my comment is, do you have another box that says evidence, or under findings, you could actually put / evidence, you know what I mean?
Yes, yeah. So really what we could do is, everywhere where we have a findings box, we could simply rename that to being findings or evidence. Yeah?
Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Anybody else got any thoughts or ideas or suggestions?
There are some comments about, from Sonia, she says perhaps call it objective evidence cited, or findings / general comments. So there are two suggestions, one from Sonia, one from Gaurav.
Yep, general comments.
And Joe is saying, asking a question, so no front page like old checklist, any sign off on the day needed. We'll get there.
That's exactly right. So that comes at the end of the audit report, Joe. So yes, there will be at the closing meeting with management, you'll have some closing comments, and yes, there will be detail from management representatives required at the end of the audit report. Thank you. Thank you for that, Michael. Yes, happy to make those adjustments as we go. As we said, it's great to have this feedback on the day, because then we can offer up a product that everybody's very clear on how to use.
There's a comment from you, Raj. He agrees with you, Amanda, and corrective actions tab shall be used for post-audit when reviewing evidences received.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Gaurav. Yuvraj. Perfect. Excellent. All right, so if we make the assumption that our findings boxes now say findings / objective evidence, everybody happy if we were to change the terminology to that? Yep, good, thank you. Yes, wonderful. Excellent. That's right. Okay. So I'm just would as a group, would you like to go through step by step in each of these questions? That's a question I'd like to put out to everybody, as to whether you see a benefit in us filling in every single field as we go through this report based upon the case study, or do we touch on the most important points from a function perspective and then answer any questions that may come out of that?
Might be the latter.
Yep. Yeah, okay, wonderful. So I'm trying to find our main sites in here.
There's a comment from Ajay.
Yes,
Focus on the important topics.
thank you. Very good. Excellent.
And there's another one.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I'm interested to go through the red alert questions.
Excellent. Great. Thank you. All right. Okay. I'm just trying. Okay. Let's use this as an example. So does a site have a worker induction process? We're going to say that the induction should minimally cover workplace information, policies and procedures, etc., codes of conduct, provision of the Fair Work Information Statement and the Casual Employment Information Statement, which we know is mandatory underneath the Fair Work Act. Now, as an example, in this case study, I'm going to simply assume that an on-site induction is carried out at the main packing shed when employees commence. So we can say that there's a baseline induction there. However, we know that with this particular business, there are 2 greenhouses on 2 particular sites, and one site is in Oak Road and the other site that has a greenhouse is in Maple Lane. Those greenhouses, or those glass houses, however we might like to call them, actually have a fair amount of computer technology and a different work health and safety risk that require a different induction process. So to show the variance in here, what we would do, we would say that, does this conform? If we know that the business has conformity across all sites, we can just carry on and move it from here. If we want to split the businesses now to say that perhaps there's not been an adequate induction at the greenhouse sites, then we click our little arrow section here. We split through into the question. So after clicking split, each controlled site will have its individual findings, observations, and corrective actions for this question. Any information that's already present is copied amongst the site, but once a question is split, they cannot be remerged. So we'll split now. And then you'll get to see the individual site IDs up the top. So should there be umbrella policies, etc., that are across all of the sites, if we can see that there are conformances across all of the sites, wonderful. However, you're not really going to know that until you visit each individual site. So whilst you can, at the very first site that you're at, write in either the findings or the observations or the evidence, and then you end up at site 2 and you need to vary that, you can then split the site when you're at site 2, and you can make a notation or a finding specific to that site. So we can turn around and say that at our Elm Road address, which is our 113 on your list, does it conform? No, it does not conform. There has been no specific site induction at this location. For greenhouse employees. Now, you might like to detail what the risks are. You might like to see that there are different pieces of machinery or equipment that they need to be using, and the standard induction checklist does actually not cover off on those pieces of equipment. So the findings can be detailed then for each individual site. You can attach the file, etc., or a photograph once again, and then you can move on down. So that one particular question is split, and then it will take you back. Not everything is split thereafter, just that isolated question. And then it takes you on to the next question as a group, as an umbrella answer again. Does the site have a training process for workers when they commence employment? Yes, they do. It conforms. Training is provided on the job, in the field, and reviewed for competency for 3 weeks. Something along those lines. In that regard, we can add in whatever we would normally add and continue to move on. Does the site keep a record of the training? Perhaps it doesn't. Perhaps the site does not conform, and specifically, we need to split that out again. We split into the multi-site, and then we're able to detail the findings and the corrective actions for each site. So in some instances where there's a large organisation, they've got different growing areas, and we perhaps might find this along some of the more corporate enterprises that we're starting to deal with, is that they may have a suite of HR policies and procedures which are overarching for all employees as they are inducted, they've commenced, the payroll is done from a head office, etc. However, the actual on-farm practices on those locations may differ. So I think what's important is if there are issues, and we can identify whether they're a systemic issue or whether they're an isolated issue. Is that issue as a result of an ineffective policy or procedure that's actually coming from head office, or is it a more localised issue with a farm manager or a site manager? Then we should be able to validate what it is that we've been able to find in each location very, very clearly. So from when the report is generated at the end, which we'll go through an example of, we will be able to see quite clearly how that data is captured overall for the business.
A couple of comments.
Yes.
Jackie is asking, can you send out, not right now, an example of a completed report and what should be roughly in each box as a reference tool? Another comment in similar lines is from Ajay. A good example of golden report example would help all.
Yes. And look, I suppose the purpose of today was perhaps to try and start building that. But if we were going to go through and complete a full audit report, we may be sitting together for 8 hours, which I'm sure we have all other pressing priorities. So maybe, Sachin, what we can spend some time in doing is putting some examples in there, and the purpose actually was to have you guys provide some examples along the way based on the case study. So if anyone has got anything that they'd like to proffer up today, then I'm more than willing to get that in there. And the purpose was actually to try and create a gold standard report today that everybody was going to be happy with examples.
Another comment.
Yes.
I can see there is a color changed to question, as well as if the question doesn't conform. This feature will help auditors if they miss to click the right options where the non-conformance is raised.
Okay, hang on. Sorry, say that for me again.
I can see there's a color changed to question, as well as if the question doesn't conform.
There you go. Okay, wonderful. I didn't know that they'd put that in. So if we're conforming, it's just the standard grey and white. If it doesn't conform, we have a red border that pops up around it. Wonderful. That wasn't a feature that we requested, but that's very good.
Is it red?
Yes, it is.
It looks like amber to me.
It's a colour,
I think it's yellow or red or
something.
yeah. Sorry.
Have we tested the functionality of the portal in remote areas where the phone coverage it's not great?
Well, this has been able to be designed so it can be completed on or offline. So
Because you don't want to use the host's
Wi-Fi or
Wi-Fi
absolutely,
for obvious reasons.
that's exactly right. And you might not have enough.
Use your phone,
Yes.
phone.
Correct. So my advice would be, whilst you are able to then have, access before you leave for the audit, open up the audit report in here, and then you're good to complete. And as soon as you then come back into a service area or connect to Wi-Fi again, that data then is uploaded.
Just a quick note about the time frames. You have 8 more minutes before we have Rachel and Benjamin.
Wonderful. Okay. Fabulous. Thank you. So yes, look, I think we have a resounding request for a gold standard exampled report. Sachin, is that something that we'll consider providing?
We will consider providing it. However, I would like to know what is the golden report, because every report is unique. And in my opinion, yes, we can provide some examples, but they may not be applicable to all situations. So,
Of course. And my understanding is, and please, for those of you who do SEDEX audits, put some clarity around this for me if you wouldn't mind. But my understanding is that there has been a gold standard report, or there's something that's already perhaps pre-populated in SEDEX with sort of best practice answers, and then you amend for each audit. Is that correct, or is it something that I'm misunderstanding?
Jack says, does online report? Sorry, I'll let people answer that first and then go to the comment.
Thank you.
I believe they've published an
Thanks,
older
Lee.
version.
That's what, yeah. Sorry.
Oh no, I believe there is a report published by SEDEX
Okay.
with comments on what should be included, but it's not for the new system. So
No. Okay.
whether that's changed, I don't.
And is it an example? It provides real life examples, or
I think it's
preferred wording or something along those lines. Okay. Okay.
I think
Thanks,
if you can
Alice.
give us an example of various reports, they cut and paste so that nobody knows whose report it is from various
identified.
auditors, and that can be compiled as a golden report.
Thanks again.
It's just a thought anyway.
Jamie, are you offering your services to complete an example report for us? Thank you. Good on you.
And a couple of comments, 3 comments actually. First is a question from Jackie Pelham. Does the online report auto save as you are working on it, or do you have to manually save along the way? Great question. Also, can you enter some information and leave as a draft and complete later if needed?
Yes to all of those. Yes, it does save for you as you're entering that data. Yes, you can leave the report and come back to it. So say, for example, you might be feverishly a note taker via pen and paper rather than actually completing the audit report on the day in its entirety. So the answer to those is yes. Jackie?
Wonderful. The next comment, which I absolutely loved, thanks, Lee. The risk is that a golden report will be used as a template.
Exactly right.
Thanks for that comment. The next comment is from Joe. Reporting is covered on CSCA training.
Yes.
The next comment, it's a comment. SMETA used to have a reference report for the reviewers, but not for the auditors.
Interesting. Okay, thank you for that.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, now that's good to know. So I think everyone's clear. It's a very, very simple, easy to use function to split the sites, to be able to split each question so that you can detail any finding and then those respective corrective actions to be uploaded into there. Observations, which will be good or bad. Happy to take that feedback and change the heading from findings to an objective evidence. That's great to know. And then what you'll be able to see when the corrective actions are, I think we touched on this beforehand, status open, closed. If it remains open, it's only partial evidence supplied, and then the closed date in full. So this, whilst it may look a little different, the question formatting is the same flow as the Excel spreadsheet that we have used currently. And in that regard, we've kept it as consistent as possible. If anyone has any suggestions in regards to any wording or anything like that at all, then certainly please feel free to provide us with that feedback, because this report we're able to amend and adjust internally as, you know, as we update from a continuous improvement aspect. Thank you. We've just had Rachel Chambers, CEO of Queensland Fruit and Vegetable Growers, join us. Rach, it's my video that's on. If you'd like to come take a seat here, that would be wonderful. Thanks, everybody. Rachel Chambers.
Hi, everybody. I apologise for the late entry. So I was supposed to be here this morning. However, Parliament is on in Queensland and got called away and did a couple of other things that I had to do. So thank you to the team for doing this each year. For me, it gives us a chance to connect and to go through what our priorities are for auditing the Fair Farms program. So I know that you've probably already spoken about this, but let's just start with I'm really excited about the new audit checklist portal. I am hoping that it does make your life a little bit more efficient. Hats off to everyone who does auditing, in that it is a meticulous job, and we certainly respect the job that you do. We're trying to save time for you, but we also are very aware that the grower's time is really valuable. So we're not sure how this will go into the future, but I suppose we're looking for some feedback, some ongoing feedback when we're talking about the checklist, in that, is it saving you time? Is it not saving you time? Do you see it potentially saving growers time or not? So like every new thing that we bring out, this is a partnership arrangement with our auditors, and we'd really like some feedback. The other thing that I'm sure you've touched on so far is last year's decision to bring in a non-audit pathway. So that was a decision based around, at the moment, or back then, the Fair Farms standard said you had to go to audit. Now, that was great. However, we were only picking up the share of growers that had direct sales to retail and actually needed that. And what we were doing is we were missing a big chunk of growers who, our mantra is that we will educate and support growers towards compliance. And so to do that, we felt that we needed to bring in this non-audit pathway. Now, the pathway is for those growers who do not have a need to be audited, but still want to ensure that they're doing the right thing. So as you would fully be cognizant of, the amount of legislation and regulations for these growers is immense. We wanted to make sure we gave them every tool possible to help them achieve compliance. We also wanted you as auditors to know that at any stage, we've made the non-audit pathway to be able to be transitioned to audit if that's what they chose to do. The third, I'll wait for that motorbike to pass. The third, probably really exciting addition is the labour hire component of Fair Farms. So this has been in the trenches for a solid year, 18 months. We did wait to see what happened nationally at this level, but then we decided, given such, and I've written it down, the 75% compliance or non-compliance issues sitting in labour hire, we felt that we couldn't wait anymore, that we had to make it part of the Fair Farms environment. Once again, as auditors and as partners in this compliance program, the expectation is we would like feedback as to how this is being not just accepted, but how it's working with labour hire. And, definitely the Fair Farms team wants to have continuous improvement in this space. So I think that's going to be I believe it will be a very quick uptake, and believe it'll be very large. But I'm interested to see how this plays out into the future. Witness auditors have come about because we also need to do our due diligence in that as auditors of the Fair Farms program, you in effect are representing the Fair Farms standards, and we need to ensure that how you represent Fair Farms is how lives up to our expectation of how you represent Fair Farms. So once again, absolutely all feedback is welcome and necessary. The thing for me is the Fair Farms program, and what we expect out of auditors is the three R's. So I've got a local government background, so it's not rates, roads and rubbish. It is reputation, relationships and robustness. So the reputation is the Fair Farms reputation, and we want all auditors to be known as concise and robust and really, really great at your jobs. But we also need you to have a relationship with the growers, and one that we're very, very concerned about is growers have and you will know more than us, they have a fear of audit, and sometimes it's a rational fear and sometimes it's a very irrational fear of audit. We want you to have a relationship with the grower that says we are here to help education and support you towards compliance, and we're here to actually help define whether you're achieving the objectives that is absolutely necessary. So we're not doing anything untoward, and we're here with you to try and help identify if you're not doing things well. And we always, we say it's better for an auditor to tell you if you're not doing things well than potentially some other entity telling you that you're not doing things well. So it's about that relationship, and it's of course about robustness, in that the expectation is we're running a national compliance program that with that, we expect you to uphold the Fair Farms standards as you would any other standard. So they're the three things for me, and they're the three things that I talk to the Fair Farms team about. If you as auditors can have that reputation and uphold the reputation of Fair Farms, and what we don't want auditors to be like is that culture of, I'm here in an audit and I'm going to mess your day up. Like that is something that we too often hear in the industry. We have a role as Fair Farms to not have that as part of our Fair Farm auditing culture. Our culture is education and support towards compliance. We do that by building relationships, and we also do that knowing that we need a robust compliance schedule. So I will leave it there because I know that you've got a heap of work to go through today, but I welcome any kind of feedback generally all year round, but also about this particular day, because it is the day that a lot of our touch points are made with auditors. Other than that, I wish you all well, and I thank the Fair Farms team once again for all their good work over the year. Thank you, Amanda.
Thanks, Rachel.
Bye. Thanks, guys. Bye, Rachel.
So going by the agenda, we can take a 15 minutes break now, if everyone's okay with that. It's 12:15 here in Brisbane, so we'll see you all at 12:30. It's 15 minutes. All good? We'll be online, so stay online, and we'll be back at 12:30. Thanks. Welcome back, everyone. Do we need a couple of extra minutes?
You're on mute, session. Adrian's on mute.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Okay, let's give a couple of extra minutes. Welcome back, everyone. Let's begin the second half of this session, which is going to be the continuation of our discussion and also the case study. All right, let me just transfer the microphone to Amanda.
Yep. So. Great. I just want to
Share.
Thanks, everybody. Let me just turn off my speaker. Hello, can you hear me? Can I just get a thumbs up if people can hear me, or am I mute, please? Yeah, lovely. Awesome. Excellent. Thank you. All right, wonderful. Hopefully on your screen, and this might make a little bit of sense, hopefully. I'm quite visual, so I like to kind of see how the end result's going to look. This is how our audit report will be generated once the data is filled in the online audit portal, and the corrective actions have been closed. Then this is how the report will look for your clients or for our clients in receipt of your reports. So this is just a PDF version. I've gone through, fingers crossed, I've de-identified everything in there that should be, and I'm pretty confident that that's the case. So in here, we're just going to have an executive summary. So it's a little bit neater and a little bit nicer to be able to read through than the current Excel spreadsheet. Clearly identifies the sites, the produce, the number of employees and samples that were taken, the details of the labour hire providers that were also forming part of the audit as well.
Michael had his hand up. Michael, you had a question?
Sorry, my hand was meant to be a thumbs up.
Oh, wonderful. That's all right. That do I get five? Is it 5 times thumbs up in that instance, Michael?
Yeah, exactly. Or a high five, hey?
High five. Thank you. Wonderful. So from a visual point of view, each audit report is going to have its own unique identifier number that we've embedded into there. So therefore, we've been able to protect any kind of duplication, number one, from the audit reports with it being done in the portal. And then number 2, each unique report, as it's generated, will have its own code. So we've got the closing meeting comments, which always was evident on our summary page on our checklist. So Joe did ask about this before. Was there a management representative signature or detail, et cetera, in there? So when you have the closing meeting comments, this is what's going to be apparent, and that, the business acknowledges all of the findings, et cetera, and the site was more than welcome and accommodating and offered you a cup of tea and no other forms of bribery or coercion, which is lovely. And full access to the site and workers were provided. So then, yes, at the end of our checklist, there is a section for the management representative to type in their name and the role and the date. If we were to then be looking back at the checklist, we'd also see that we have an audit closed or audit end time that we would pop in, so that we then have a record of the audit start and finish time. Very apparent on the opening pages of this report is the recertification cycle for the business, so that it's very clear to them what time frame that they'll be on for their next audit. Basically, it's to try and alleviate a little bit of that pressure and confusion as to how that has happened and how that's come up. We often field calls wondering who and how that recertification cycle is actually determined, and it's quite clear they haven't read the rules, and that's okay. We're here to answer all sorts of questions. So then we'd see any kind of summary findings in here, very much detailed if there were any finding alerts, and we know that there's a separate process if there is a finding alert raised. And that process also impacts on the auditing body to notify the Fair Farms as a schema owner within a certain period of time also. But the obligations on the auditor to advise the auditing body within a certain time frame after the audit has been closed or audit's been finished. So we can see that there's summary pages on each site in the initial section, and with an overall audit score for each site. So then the business should be able to determine if one site's scoring higher than the other, why? Drill down on that. Is it a lack of training? Is it a different kind of management style that's going on? Is there a process which has been executed very well on certain sites but not on others? It gives them the ability to really sort of have a look at the impact on that and the business. Findings and observations of the site goes through. So this is how the automation of the report then looks like once we have had details popped in. So we'd be popping in workers' comp policy, for example, all of the legal code, the level of the conformance or the non-conformance is detailed in each section as well. So the businesses are very clear. We know that findings then, if we make those adjustments, is either going to say findings or objective evidence. In this case, there was no finding. It's just the data that's been provided. So perhaps it is a little bit misleading in that language that we do need to refine. It's a free text box, so it's not going to have a character limit. You can type as much evidence and information in there as you would like to, or detail as much as possible. And what will happen is that in the report, it will self-adjust and paginate when that's populated. Anyone have any questions or comments about the presentation of the report so far? No? Okay, wonderful.
Got this one.
Yep.
Is there a spell check on the report?
No. No, there's no spell check on the report.
From Alma.
Unfortunately, Alma, I'm sorry to say. No, I can ask. It probably would be very handy, but I say base. It might be handy. If it's a function that we can get popped in there, then we'll see if we can get that actioned. Yes, no American spell checks. That's exactly right. Okay, spell checks. It's on my list, Alma.
Ben said please. And then Alma said, oh, yes, please.
Righto. Okay, ladies, understand. Thank you. So that report will be as long as it needs to be based upon the information that's in there. It's nice, it's concise, it's easy to read. It's broken down into the sections as per the standard audit checklist. We follow that through. Each section's detailed, so working eligibility, we know exactly where we're at. So I think from a readability perspective for a business, it's quite a bit easier. As much as it's more pages, it's actually quite a bit easier to understand than perhaps what they're being provided with currently. Excellent. Everyone happy if we move on from there? Show of thumbs. Yep, perfect. Excellent. I'll stop sharing my screen again. Sachin, how do I get back into the presentation, please, now?
Open the presentation and share share in Teams.
And in Teams, thank you. Present. Michael's got his hand up. Oh, now I can see. Michael, yes. Well, while I'm flicking through, you have a question? Or was that a happy to move on?
No, move on, thanks. I thought my hand was down.
That's okay. No, it could have just been a lag on my end from previous screen. Okay, fabulous. All right, I would really like to have and seek your opinions and experience and thoughts around our labour hire provider situation. So at the moment, Sachin showed you the fact that we have increased our scope of certification for labour hire providers. We've written that into our rules. It's been approved by the board. It's in version 3. We have a new membership framework being built into the registration portal. So what's going to happen is if a labour hire provider would like to join Fair Farms as a member, they'll have to identify as a labour hire provider straight away at point of registration. That's going to link into a different invoicing system for them. As Sachin said, there's going to be a variance in the pricing than what there will be to our standard grower members. So we need to understand that from the outset. And that too will also be the same for our non-audit pathway participants. So when we have a new member register, they're going to identify either as a non-audit pathway participant, which means essentially they are not supplying a retailer and they're not supplying an agent who is supplying a retailer, unless there's a requirement that as a tier 2 they must at this point in time. If they are an audit pathway participant and they are a tier 1 or a tier 2 required, they'll identify as an audit pathway participant, or if they're a labour hire. So that will be a selection process for them that's right up front, which will then take them on a slightly different journey, but it will look the same and feel the same. There's going to be a lot more information required at the outset when a labour hire provider joins us as a member. So there's a fair amount of evidence that they're going to have to upload at point of registration. You can see that on the screen. So we want them to provide us with an ABN extract, the licensing in the applicable states to which they're licensed, their policy, their certificate of currency, enterprise agreement, if relevant, if they're covered by that, any induction and employee documents or handbooks, a payslip template and a piece rate template. We'll undertake a desktop audit on those to ensure compliance from the point of registration. What's going to be important is that we're validating that there are no subsidiaries or ancillary companies that are trying to get scooped up in a membership. So the ABN that they're supplying to us, we'll ensure that that's the ABN which is on the payslip. We'll ensure that that's the company name and the company ABN that's on their certificate of currency, etc. So we'll try and triangulate that information as their starting point in their registration with us. The reason that's important is that we know that often there can be a fair amount of morphing over a period of time before that business ends up getting audited. And when you go and audit them, they actually may have a slightly different ABN or a different payslip template or a completely different company name. So we want to try and capture what was the evidence to start with and what's the evidence that they're being audited against. We know that for our grower members, labour hire providers tend to be one of their pain points during audit. So we feel that if we can help support them by having certification, it will give them a certain level of comfort. We know it's only a snapshot in time, but we feel that it should give them a certain level of comfort that they can say to the labour hire provider, look, I really want to use somebody who's Fair Farm certified. Can you go through that process for me and then we can talk? We know that in some instances it's really difficult, particularly in regional areas where there's only one provider and perhaps they're over a barrel with lack of choice. But this has got to be a starting point until this national harmonised scheme comes in. And even then we know that perhaps the compliance officers and the resourcing within those is still going to miss quite a bit on ground. Perhaps they're also a PALM. What was that question that popped up, Sachin, please?
LHA.
Yes, and if they're a PALM registered LHA, that's exactly right. So I'm not too sure who that came from. Was that Michael? So Michael, yes, that's exactly right. And if they are a PALM registered LHA, thank you, that we would be asking and seeking a copy of that deed or scheme agreement cover page as well. We would then we would then internally, as part of our process, go on to the approved employers database to ensure that that was actually the name that they were, acting as a labour hire provider, not anything else as well. Thank you. I will actually pop that in there also, should that one be relevant. Can I hear from anybody in the chat, please, who has actually conducted a SEDEX audit on a labour hire provider firm? Can I see the chat? Here we go. Has anybody in our group audited labour hire under a SMETA audit? No?
I think I've encountered one that had undertaken some sort of.
Yep.
I've certainly encountered a labour hire that has undertaken a Fair Farms audit as a grower, but also provides labour.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, was also a grower. Yeah. Okay. I think I know exactly who you're referring to. Thanks, Shane. I know that this is probably going to be quite tricky to execute effectively because we understand that. Sorry, say again?
Good. I'm just on that training at the moment on Teams.
I think that's Dr.
Yeah, that'd be good. I just wanted to say it's so lovely to hear.
Muted him. Thank you. So lovely to hear. Thank you, Doctor. We understand that the execution of this might be a little bit tricky, primarily because we know that the workforces with their LHPs are geographically dispersed by their very nature. So I would like some thoughts surrounding how you would best think that is tackled from an on-site audit. At the moment, we have a situation where in our standards, we have got we've got what it is that they need to start with in regards to what they will be audited against. But when the audit actually takes place on the ground, there will have to be a situation where you're visiting that labour hire provider's head office to be able to validate the paperwork and the documentation and those sorts of things. But then how do you think it most practical to validate when workers are on various host sites? Any thoughts around that? No, it is a tricky one.
I can't see how that can be done because these people are all around Australia. So, you know, if you're looking at some of the bigger firms, then you're looking at a head office in Armidale, but they've then got sites all around Australia. I think if you want to split it into two categories, maybe just have it look at their systems from a corporate approach to make sure that the systems are there to capture information that would be compliant during a normal audit. And then you'd need to select perhaps one site where workers are being deployed, and then you could then validate what from a corporate level you're then determining or seeing. So it gives you an opportunity to sort of see part of it in practice. You won't see all of it because it'd be too difficult, because a lot of these labour hire firms have got bigger over the last few years, during COVID and also because of the PALM scheme. So it's going to be very difficult. The smaller growers, look, the smaller providers, of course, no problems. But I do think that you need to see it from a corporate level, yes, but then you need to sort of see it from an application level on site as well.
And thanks for that, Shane. Do you think in that instance it's two kind of potential labour hire provider memberships, or a breakdown or a tier, for example? So if you have a corporatised LHP, that you have, they might, I don't like to use the word tier because sometimes it's a bit confusing, but you might call them an A-grade LHP, for example. They're corporate, they've got a geographically dispersed workforce across Australia, versus a secondary tier that perhaps is just a localised labour hire provider who's working within a very easy to audit geographical region.
There needs to be a distinction drawn. Yeah, I think so. Like, I think some of these providers are very large and some are very small. So if you go into the Coffs Harbour region, you'll find ones that maybe have 20 employees. And then if you go further, into more remote areas, you might have people that have thousands of people within Australia. So it depends upon the organisation. So I did put a little comment in the chat box. I also see some potential issues with the fact is, if we, as auditors, are saying that the sites are compliant, they may try to use that as some type of shield to say, well, you want to get material during this audit, and the grower says, well, why do you need to see that? Because if I've only engaged with a labour hire provider who is Fair Farm certified. So we just need to be careful and ensure that all parties involved realise that the certification of labour hire, if we want to call it that, is on the basis of what was found during a particular audit on a particular day. So that way the application of what they're doing still is assessed during whatever snapshot audit we do. So I can just see the conflict arising. That's all. And I've seen it in the past. I've dealt with it in the past, and I just don't want it to be. It just has to be so abundantly made clear to these businesses that it cannot be used as some type of shield. That's all.
No, that's exactly right. It's not going to exempt them from having to have their labour hire provider on farm with evidence at the time of their own grower audit. That's exactly right. And I suppose really what it is, it's a measure to simply say, we would like to see growers encourage their labour hire providers to become a Fair Farm certified. It provides, as you said, it's just a snapshot in time. It's just like a balance sheet. It doesn't speak to what happens the day after or the day after that or the day after that. But what it will do, hopefully, is it can provide a little bit of pushback for the growers to say, well, have you undertaken a Fair Farms audit? Great, then you should have no issue in providing that documentation for me. Can I conduct my due diligence? I'd like you to send me pay slips on a monthly basis, et cetera, et cetera. So it will hopefully help them have those difficult conversations at the setup of the agreement also.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, we did. It just needs to be very clear. That's all. Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. A grower cannot use it as a shield to try and have that section of the audit carved out and have that as an arm's length. That's not the intent of it whatsoever. Does anyone else have any thoughts around or any ideas? Thank you. Yep, thanks, Shane. Michael said good point. Thanks very much. Ta. So we have a specific labour hire provider checklist. Now, the checklist, I won't go into that because the framework of it is very much just like our standard auditing checklist. However, it encompasses a whole lot more documentation, which is all of what we see on the screen and all of which is requested at point of registration as well. So the documentation process and the documentation validation for LHPs is going to be a matter of triangulating what they provided at the time of registration as to what they are being audited against to make sure that the nominated officer or the executive officer, etc., has been maintained that whole way through, that there hasn't been a variance. If there are any conditions on a labour hire licence, that those conditions then are being adhered to. The most common one I see is that there's submission of payroll records 7 days after the end of the month for a lot of them. I do note that the LHA Victoria is actually imposing quite a few more conditions, as in a list of accommodation and list of names of employees within 30 days of starting date or 30 days of new accommodation being acquired, etc. So there's quite a number of complexities there that we will be building in to be able to capture, are they reporting in the manner in which they need to report, in the timeframes they need to report for the regulators. But I'd also like to think that we can start verifying other pieces of evidence. So, for example, if a labour hire provider says that they're a PALM approved employer, are they registered with the PALM scheme as an LHP, or are they registered as a direct grower? And that has occurred in the past. And I suppose it's a matter of how do we end up going that one step deeper? And is there a mechanism then to advise PALM that this person is operating in an LHP capacity? Because we know that the eligibility to be a PALM approved labour hire provider is more onerous than what it is as a direct grower. So whether that's done intentionally to circumvent or whether there was an exemption, we need to be able to understand that and get to the bottom of that a little bit further. I don't know who might like to perhaps tackle the labour hire beast as the first kind of audit, but I actually have 2 labour hire firms who would like to join us as members and go to audit. So I'll be happy to have conversations with any auditing bodies who might like to take that as potentially a test pilot scenario, and then we can amend as we go. Thank you, Shane. I see a thumbs up. Good job. So the auditor checklist, as far as the functionality and as far as the reporting function, as far as the confidential internal function, is the same for labour hire providers as it is for standard growers. It's just a different level and a different layer of documentation we'll be seeking in that checklist. So I'd like to open it up to the floor to garner any thoughts about other things we may need to include, because this is under construction as we speak. It's easy to finalise, and we'll see later on when our anticipated go live date is. But we're in a position right now to make any amendments as possible as we can. No thoughts yet? No. Okay, lovely. All right. So the way that the Fair Farm standards would work is that if we were to treat the labour hire provider simply as, in our mind, for the application of the standards, as a member. So they're going to go through, they're going to be giving us access to all areas. For the sites where that they have nominated, where there are employees on a host employer's sites, access has been granted on that site. They have been able to provide the relevant documentation, the employment contracts, the payslip templates, everything that is required as per a normal Fair Farms standard. The transferability is very, very similar to exactly how you're auditing right now. What we do need to be mindful of is that some labour hire providers will subcontract out those services, in which case they will then obviously be subject to auditing of their subcontracted labour hire providers' information. Does that make sense to everybody, that if we have a look at the head contractor, for want of a better term, as labour hire ABC is the head contractor, they're the ones that have sought Fair Farms membership, they're the ones that are being audited, they're then subcontracting out some of their services to XYZ labour hire services. At point of audit, those XYZ payslips employees will also then form part of that labour hire provider's interview process. Are we pretty clear that the structure is near identical for the way we operate with our members at the moment? Or is everyone in a state of confusion?
Thumbs up.
Thumbs up.
One.
One is confused or one is happy? Okay. Does anyone need any clarification? We're all good then. I'm assuming thumbs up is all good. All right, wonderful. It's a group membership, but each individual entity must be audited. Yes, Lee. Interesting. How would you, can you expand upon that for me? Because we have that same similar situation from a corporate point of view with growers, and we state that if they have a different ABN, they need to have a separate membership. How might that look in your mind from a group perspective? Treat them as a side.
Perhaps just treat them as a site, like you've got the individual numbered sites in this report that you've just put up. So perhaps treat them as a site under that one umbrella then. But I've not done any not done any Fair Farms at all. I'm very, very new to this process, so this is just my ignorance speaking.
No, and sometimes that's excellent to have, because sometimes someone that's not seen it before sees things with fresh eyes. That's quite all right.
So if there's an umbrella, organisation, but you still need to make sure that everybody or each subcontract into that is also compliant, then perhaps treat them as a site with their own number. One audit, but treat them as a site with their own number, like you have in your site, in your field audit.
Yeah. I think, are you talking about primarily for the subcontracted LHPs?
Yeah, perhaps. But when you've got huge organisations like the FIP group and stuff, I'm not quite sure how that works with this.
No.
As I said,
No, that's right. And I think the other, thank you for that feedback. That's good. I think the membership will be held by whoever the ABN holder is. That's who the membership will be with. And then the audit will take place for that member. That's who the certification is for. And then should they be subcontracting that out, those subcontractors either A, become a Fair Farms member independently, or simply they form part of the Fair Farms audit for that labour hire provider, and any non-conformances raised are raised in a standard manner. I think the other thing that we're going to come across, which might provide some thought-provoking for us moving forward, is what happens when they're contracting across different industries and they are perhaps in nursing and in horticulture and in construction. Our scope is horticulture, and in our standards, rules and audit guides, it's labour hire providers. The scope is for certification for labour hire providers who are providing labour hire or on hire into the horticulture, viticulture or broader agricultural community. So we have no intentions of touching construction, no intentions of touching nursing or anything like that at all. So if we're very mindful that we've drawn a boundary and some set parameters around that. In Victoria, there's around about 656 labour hire providers who indicate that they supply on hire labour to Hort. 80% of those, I would suggest, also supply to another industry as well. So we're going to have to be mindful when reviewing documentation and payroll slips, etc., if perhaps there is a breakdown of separate sites or separate awards an employee is being paid under. I think as we progress through that process, we'll come up with some guidance around how to tackle that. We'll start with the small ones first. We'll head to Coffs Harbour. But so as
There's a question.
yes, Lachlan, please.
Hi, Amanda. Just wondering if, like, with the labour hires, if we can, especially these really large ones, if you can treat them similar to how some other sustainability programs we have, where they essentially have multiple farms. Like in this particular example, they had thousands of farms, and so it's impossible to check all of them. But they, as a requirement of that particular standard, they have to supply a self-declaration to say that they are in line with those standards, and then we only audit a sample. So I know it might be a little bit hard in terms of different industries, but if you're going through a regular basis, checking to see if they're in line with it, and then also puts a requirement on that labour hire company to make sure that those farms that they're supplying their labour hire to are making sure that they're in line as well internally, not just fair farms every, 1 to 3 years, depending on their score. Would that be something that would work, or something along those lines, or is it still?
Look, I think it's really tricky with a social compliance audit, especially when you're certifying an organisation and you haven't actually conducted sampling across the board where certain things have been allowed to be provided through a self-assessment. I think, number one, the unions would have a field day with us, and our credibility would come into question in regards to the robustness of the program in that respect if we were going to allow people to self-declare. I absolutely welcome all thoughts and all feedback on how we can make it practicable and reasonable, and how we can do that. So this for us is initial steps as a program to say, this is our starting point. We know that this is going to be a work in progress and a development, and we anticipate that, when we release version 4 this year, there'll be certain amendments that we'll have made to this as well. But we really feel that we've got to stake a flag in the sand and start somewhere. And we know it's not going to be perfect, and we know it's going to be tricky and hard, but we feel it's a really important aspect for us to be able to cast the net over and start actually holding some businesses to account. So I'm happy to explore all ideas and all options in a way that may be able to be suitable for the program.
And I think we did I'm just trying to remember, because it was about midway through last year, SMETA, we did SMETA 1 for a labour hire company, because SMETA changed their approach to it as well. They used to have a particular approach to it, which they've made obsolete, and they kind of treat it as like, I think it was Lee said, where you have the main one and then each of those other businesses are treated as a site essentially, but it's not sampling. I'm pretty sure you had to go to all of them. In this particular case, it was only 3, luckily, but I don't know how, this whole problem is that if you have, 20 farms all across Australia, it's not really possible to get to all of them in a cost efficient way. So yeah, I don't know if we're going to find a particularly ideal way all the way through, but I know SMETA are doing it, and they have changed their approach.
Yeah, and I think Lee's comment may have been in regards to treat the subcontractors as a controlled site, where I understand what you're saying is you have the ABN and the business, and you're doing your due diligence on the documentation at head office level, and then you're visiting different host employers' sites. And in that instance that you gave an example of, there was only 3, which is very achievable, which is great. And if we take the subcontracting aspect out of it for this point in time and just say, for example, Plant Grow Pick, who are absolutely huge. So they're based down in Victoria, but they're up in Mareeba, and they're all over the show, out at Emerald and everywhere. How can we put our thinking caps on to manage that? Is it a situation where you do a documentation review and then you focus on the sites which are closest to that head office? No, Jamie's shaking his head. How?
I'm thinking about, just thought, if you've got a very large organisation, then with a large number of employees, then presumably your audit days need to be longer, and the cost of audit should be higher because you have resources into auditing it.
Yes.
Do this sort of central site, if you've got a central office, check all the documentation, cell phone, payslips, that sort of stuff. But the interviewing and the actual sort of observation in terms of, you know, the accommodation, transport to work, transport back, should be done perhaps a number of them. You probably can't sample each site, but you sample a number of sites according to the size of the organisation and the people they employ.
I think that's what Lachlan was kind of alluding to, doing some sort of sampling where possible. I don't know how this approach might work, whether it could be a multi-auditor audit, and so therefore you might have an audit undertaken in head office, and therefore, you know, an auditor's going out on day one, writes everything within the audit report. It's visible to 2 other auditors. They're all in 3 geographically dispersed areas where there is host employers on site on the same day. And Jamie's at site number 1, Alice is at site number 2, and Shane's at site number 3, for example. And that's the audit day on 3 geographically dispersed sites, worker interviews, site tours, et cetera, et cetera. Whether it could be a multi-auditor situation, I don't know, but I think, like I said, it's going to be a work in progress for us to move through, and happy to take any brainstorming suggestions that you might come up with.
That's exactly how to do it. The same company may have a food processing plant in, say, South Island, New Zealand, some in Western Australia, as well as 2 in South Wales.
Yeah.
And that's exactly how.
And do they audit on the same day for that?
No.
Okay. Right. Yep. Well, I'm sure we'll work through it. But as I said, it will have a lot of moving parts to it, but we feel that we had to start somewhere. So I'm sure it will be baby steps for us initially. But as I said, we've got 2 LHPs who are ready to, who are good to go. There's some good comments. Yep. So
Joe first.
Joe, include agreement of LHP to accept unannounced audit sampling with some of the sites. Yeah, great suggestion, Joe. Yep, thank you. Gaurav has said remote sampling for remote sites approved by Fair Farms prior based on initial evaluation of the information provided by the LHP and ongoing surveillance on LHP and remote sites. And then multi-auditor is a good option as well. Michael, Global Gap, for example, have a similar system where the certified company conduct internal audits on their sub-companies, and then as an external CB conducts an audit as well as a square root of the number of companies attached. Wow. Gosh, does the checklist have capacity for multi-auditors, Sam? It does not yet, but it may need to. So that's a mechanism that we can add and a function that we can certainly add. So if that's the pathway we go down, then fabulous, great. Thank you. So you can see we've started on the framework. We've opened this up to some suggestions in this respect. I've got another online ability to be able to show you, but it's very much like our initial online auditor checklist. It's just got those other documentation that we'll be capturing right at the very front. And we're working with our soft guys to build the member interface at the registration point in time as well. We did have an area to be able to capture some suggestions, but I think we've been madly writing these down and we've got them in the chat, which is really fabulous. Thank you for that. We've got some key dates. So we would love to think that our audit checklist we can release on the 25th. So that's in 3 days. The feedback on that for me is findings and objective evidence. And then I think while we were on the break, we also had some suggestions about perhaps not having the corrective actions appear unless there was actually a non-conformance. So keeping those additional fields hidden to not confuse the reporting or to not add 2 additional blocks to scroll through, that might be an option for us to have a look into, that only if it's raised as a non-conforming finding, then does the findings open, and we have the objective evidence at the top as a description of the question. We are happy to run parallel auditor checklists with Excel. We're yet to determine a date, but we sort of think at least a 3-month rollout perhaps may be enough. That's a moving target for us at this point in time. It may take a little bit longer for those who may not do as many Fair Farms audits as others to become familiar with, and as we go through. But so we're happy to run the 2 in parallel for the time being until we can transition 100% of people across. Our end of April is our deadline for our membership and registration for our labour hire providers. So that's not too far away. We're looking at 5 weeks, and same time frame for the audit checklist, which, as I said, is under construction right now. Happy to have any feedback provided as to how that's going to look. Sachin alluded to before that we have our technical committee meeting and our ESRGs. Our technical committee meeting is meeting 3rd of May. So we've started the formal review process right now. So any amendments to our standards, rules or guidelines, or any thoughts, please, you are welcome to make some submissions to us and fill in some documentation, and it then gets put forth through that proper process flow to ensure that we can have any adjustments occur at our level. And I think that's it from a key date perspective. Our ESRG, as we said, those 2 committees will open up again. Their expiration date for those memberships is 31st of December this year. So we'll be opening up to expressions of interest in around about the October. If anyone would like to join us on the ESRG, that would be fabulous. And other than that, in regard to any of the other content, we haven't gone through the case study anywhere near as much as what my intention was to do. But perhaps from a gold standard or a best practice or something, because we've all got a copy of this case study, perhaps I'll take the time and I'll create an audit report based, no. We have some time.
Yes.
Shall we try and utilise the case study for the next 30 minutes and build out an audit report online together? Yeah, fabulous. All right. Well, I'll open it up and I will be directed by all of you experts on the other side of the screen. And room. Yes. Yes, please. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm not too sure if you heard what Sachin said then. He said if you'd like to have a read through the case study, you're certainly welcome to detail any of the things that you might like to raise as findings or observations. So if you'd like to raise it as a finding, just do a capital F and then a dash, and then I will understand that that's what that is. If it's an observation, raise it as a capital O, and then we'll go from there. So whilst I open that up, I will just go share my screen again. Okay. Of course you may. Fabulous. So we're back at our audit report. I'll scroll right to the very front. Okay. Smith & Co. 5 sites. How am I going to do 2 screens? I knew I needed multi-screens here. Have you? Yeah, can I see the chat box on your computer? Thanks. Yeah, and then I can go from there. All right, excellent. Okay, everybody. Kind of sort it up. You make the brightness. Yes, please. Yeah. All right, great. Lovely. So thanks very much. Question number 1 is, was full access given to all records during the audit? Our answer is yes, we conform. Is this an acceptable level of detail? Yes, full access given to all properties listed. Is everyone happy with that? I can have a thumbs up, please. Or are there other suggestions?
Potentially copy sites
Mm-hmm.
to the following controlled sites, because you may have a split finding there.
Mm-hmm.
But that's a good solution. If you've got the ability to do that, then that's probably
Full access.
that actually works.
There you go. How's that? Yeah. Wonderful. Was full access given to all workers during the interview? What's some general commentary that people would put in there? Can I have somebody pop something in the chat box for me, please? He has access provided to site 2, documentation review and employee interviews. If we're asking specifically, was access given to all workers during the audit? How would we answer that if we're looking for some specifics around employees?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, it is unfettered, isn't it? Pretty silly. Yep, lovely. Was full access given to all site areas during the audit? Now, we know that in some instances, some areas are out of bounds, whether it be hazardous, potentially high-risk chemicals, etc. Has anyone ever come across instances where they've not been allowed in certain areas on farm? And what was the justification for that, please?
I think the one I can think of, it was a high care area, but they had windows where you could clearly observe through, and it was to do with food safety.
Mm-hmm.
But they did give me the option of roving up and going in,
Okay.
which I did at a later point just to check exits. But
Yeah.
that would be where I find it mostly.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Another one, good one.
Wonderful.
Oh, ripening rooms, yeah. That's...
Yep. Okay. That's another one where, yep, fair enough. Excellent. Yes, not allowed to visit the site. Visit the dormitories, exceptions may include areas being renovated or under construction. Sure. Yep. From a work health and safety perspective. Yep. Sure. Yeah, that's fabulous examples. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Okay, that's just an example that we can pop in there. Production, was the site in production? So if we have a look at what the definition of production is for Fair Farms, site must be harvesting and or packing. This excludes growing, pruning, planting, maintenance and construction, and any exemptions must be authorised in writing. So when we talk about peak production and we talk about production, we're looking at how can we capture the maximum number of workers on site at one point in time. And we know that most often that's when picking and harvesting and packing is occurring. Hence the reason why it's so very important to access those sites during their peak period. There can be a variance of 100 workers on some sites from 1 week to the next if we miss out on that crucial time. There have been instances where there have been auditors that have turned up on site and it's just dad and the son, and the rest of the workers finished up the week before and, harvested, finished early, etc. Really, it's a matter that perhaps that audit shouldn't have gone ahead. It makes it very difficult to do anything. And so in that instance, we need to be mindful that when the audit's booked, we are double checking that we're within that peak season and preferably smack bang in the middle of that peak season rather than on the shouldering periods. Thank you. Alice, was the site in production? Lovely. That's in full access. So our next suggestion, full access was given to all workers within scope of audit. HPs. Excellent. Include gender and shifts. Yes, particularly if there are different shifts, Jo, that's exactly right. Thank you.
I think if you weren't able to interview certain workers because, say, they were on the night shift that started at 10 o'clock at night outside, you have to be clear that it wasn't an access issue, it was a timing issue.
Yes.
That would be the only thing I would say is just provide that context.
That's right. And I suppose that comes down to when the audit plan's designed as well, to find out if there is a day and an AM and a PM shift and then plan accordingly, and perhaps it's a matter of start the audit at 11 or whatever the time frame might be, to see if you can then capture that afternoon or evening shift workers, if that's practicable, in that instance. So the question here is, was the site in production? What would be a standard enough answer to pop in there? Can I have someone pop that in the chat for me, please? How about a site was in full production, picking and packing? What did we grow? Avocados, tomatoes, and zucchinis, as per our case study. Lovely. The site hold a workers' comp policy? Yes, they did. It's not detailed. Yes, it is. However, if we have a look at the workers' comp policy that's detailed on page 1 of the case study, you'll note that it's a different business name. Now, this has happened in the past where we've had a Fair Farms member join us with an ABN, and then we've gone and we've had a look at their pay slips, and they're a different ABN. So they're running a separate farming operation to a separate payroll operation. In that instance, how would you go about auditing that? What would the discussion be there?
Suppose we'd be looking, are they associated entities? Is one a holding entity for the assets? Is one an HR entity? I do often see where they'll have one that is responsible for employment and payroll, and then another entity that is sort of the main business. Mm-hmm. Make sure it's not a subcontracting arrangement or something like that.
But does that mean that they're under one group ABN, Alice, and then they're perhaps trading as something different, or do you think it's an arm's length potential from a liability perspective? So say, for example, if there was so maybe they're running, they're growing, and they're packing operations underneath one entity, and then their payroll is derived underneath a completely separate entity. It's there to limit any kind of, issues. And then if there are issues with payroll, it's the payroll name that there's issues with from a reputational risk point of view, not the growing site and business brand. Leave the sites registered, they'll probably have a separate ABN. Yes, exactly right. Yes, exactly. So we'd be popping in there the details of the certificate of currency. It's just a thing to note to make sure that all the information from any kind of licensing is matching up. Public liability insurance, yes, we're going to say yes, we do have it. It's completely fine. That the water rights, we know that they've got 2 water licenses in this particular business. We're going to write that down. 2 water licenses. As per Victorian Water Authority, 1, and whatever the number is for that, and number 2, whatever the number is for that. If there's any effluent discharge, not applicable. Conforms.
Trade waste.
Yes. Yeah. Is there a property map indicating where workers? Yes, property map in full details supplied. So any information that we've got shows packing shed, growing site, staff car park, 4 other property maps for other addresses, include greenhouses and growing sites. I would anticipate that if there's 5 different sites, that there should be 5 different property maps if they're particularly at very distinct addresses, and that whatever the identifiable structure is on there, that we've got that captured in there too. I suppose really we're trying to paint a comprehensive picture with an audit report, and reading it, we should be able to visualise exactly how that business looks and feels, rather than it simply being a tick and flick exercise. Does the site display policy and commitment to Fair Work Act? Yes, policy displayed in staff room and on office wall. Clearly there's no spell check in here. Alma and Sam, I need to go and correct as I go, which is no fun for me. Does the site have policies about maintaining a cooperative and consultative approach with workers? Now, previously in our spreadsheet, we had these questions all as one. So when this is broken down, and we can see that there is a multitude of questions within the one section. So we have an A and we have a B and we have a C and a D. If there were 2 non-conformances within the A, B, C and Ds, they do not have a cumulative risk ratings. It is just the parent question as to where the audit score is impacted on. So if they have 2 out of 4 policies, then it's only a non-conformance once, but it's clearly identifying which policy they don't have. It is not changing or amending the audit score. So there has been no change to that. I think that's probably very important to note, that people are thinking, oh, I'm going to end up in a 1-year audit cycle if I haven't done this and this and this. No, it's simply to be able to break down into granular detail exactly what's missing. Performance management. We didn't really have anything about that in regard in the case study, but I think you'll note, did we have a disputes and grievance policy? Well, should we have had a disputes and grievance policy? Based on this case study, there was something that occurred in there that perhaps that perhaps should have been able to be raised through a formal process?
If I have a problem with my team leader and I spoke to the boss, he says I need to raise it with my team leader.
Yes. So to me, that's pretty indicative that there is no disputes and grievance policy, right? You know, that they might just say, oh, go to your manager, but no, he's the one I've got a problem with. And most often it's not, it's probably stuck in the drawer somewhere. That's right. They don't really want employees to action that because it requires a bit of hard work. So that is a no. That's a conforming. It doesn't conform. So worker interviews indicated that they did not understand a grievance mechanism was in place, nor the process. The head office produced a document, but clearly this had not been communicated to workers effectively. Thanks. You can right click on these words and spell check will come up. Yep, spell check will come up there for you, Alma and everybody. Handy. So you know it's what you're going to be discovering through the worker interviews, and it may have you to go back and amend what you found and written previously. Do we have a performance management? Yes, we do. Does the site have a policy about respecting workers' freedom of association? It didn't say, did it? But let's just say that they do, and that it was displayed.
No, I would say no.
No, why not? Why is that?
I asked if I could join a union here. My union chief's conducted, but they said they don't do.
Thank you, Jamie. I'm glad somebody read it.
Well, they may have a policy, right?
So, but that doesn't actually distinguish the fact they might have a policy, and then the fact is that then they can't actually join the union. There's two distinct questions there. Is it the only one that we have to pick from though? Does the site have a policy? Because that would seem to me to be two distinct different issues. One is anyone can have a policy, but the fact they're not working within that policy would be more the issue.
Yeah. So maybe, Shane, does it come down to, does the site have maybe we need to reword the questioning there, which is, does the site have a policy which is effectively implemented to demonstrate that employees can da.
Yeah, agreed. Yep.
You know, is it they might have a policy, but it's no good if it's collecting dust, is it?
No,
so
you need to show that it's effective in its use. That's right. So like I think this
so maybe we can't just assume that every auditor is going to say, well, there's effective implementation of the policy. Maybe we need to be more explicit in our wording.
That would help. Yes, thank you.
Issue particularly with forced and bonded labour. The Fair Farm Standard only requires a policy and procedure in place. So if we find indicators of forced and bonded labour, it's very hard to tie that back into how can we raise this as a finding within the scope of the standard.
Oh, good.
So I think there's potentially
improvements.
Yeah,
good.
A policy doesn't just
No, absolutely it doesn't. They might have a policy, but whether they've implemented it and whether they've shared it and communicated and it's effective. Yeah.
Under SELEX it says, is there evidence?
Yeah. Yes.
That takes the whole thing. Yes, you have to see a policy, but the question is there evidence?
Yeah, okay. Wonderful. Welcome to all kinds of feedback. That's excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Shane. Appreciate that. So we'll just assume that I've typed that in effectively.
A policy might exist when they. Yeah.
Does the site have an organisational structure? A documented organisational structure or organisational chart? No, there was nothing popped in there about that. No, it wasn't explicit in there. No, that's exactly right.
I suppose going back, similar to what we're just talking about, they may have an organisational structure, but if it hasn't been updated for 10 years and there's been organisational changes, what what sort of level of currency are we expecting in some of these documents?
Well, you would expect that an organisational chart is amended every time that there's a change in the resourcing and a change in the person. I mean, essentially the functions within an organisational chart may remain the same for quite a lengthy period of time, but the person enacting those functions may change quite rapidly. So I suppose really what we're looking for is if you have a payroll issue or a HR issue, who is the person that you need to be able to go and see, and is that person clearly identifiable? If it's a work health and safety issue, if it's a union representative. When you talk about currency, you're right, Alice, there could be an org chart that's been sitting there for the last 10 years and still have someone's name on it that left 5 years ago.
Usually triangular.
Of course.
You know who to see here.
Yes, exactly.
Because, let's face it, Monday is retraining day, and the number of times you've asked somebody, do you know who the first aiders are? And you've already been around the site and it's clearly posted about multiple.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So, you know,
No, that's good. Look, yeah, this information is not usually available to staff. They simply know who to report to. Add a current org chart to the question. Yeah, current. That's great. Most small businesses would not bother. That's exactly right. I know that we are mindful for time in the way that we've got 15 minutes left. I'm happy to continue on with this, but I actually would like to toss out a randomised question to the group, please. And it's in regards to MSDSs on site. And there's a bit of contention around whether Fair Farm should accept electronic copies of SDSs. At the moment, we do not explicitly state within our standards that paper copies are required. However, we do say that MSDSs need to be available. And when you have a look at the Dangerous Goods and Storage Act and the Work Health and Safety legislation, etc., readily accessible may not necessarily mean in electronic format. And I'd like to get the thoughts of the group on when it comes to insisting on paper copies. So it's a two-part question. Are we comfortable with that? And do we feel that as a compliant organisation with a compliant code of practice, when we're talking about dangerous goods and storage of such, that we should be insistent upon paper? And I know a lot of people say, but I've got them all and they're electronic because I provide them all to Fresh Care.
Or they'll say, I can bring it up on my phone.
I can bring it up on my phone, but what happens if they're not there that day? What happens if the phone is flat? What happens if all of these other things? That's right.
My view is when I've been auditing, I've found it much more accessible as an auditor if it's in the folder in the chemical storage shed.
Yeah.
First thing that they're mixing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I suppose where I've seen a successful electronic copy, they've had a tablet or a computer set up in the chem shed which has no password and it can be instantly
accessed. Yeah.
The problem is where you've got user controls or internet issues that
or people who are not necessarily comfortable in using a computer as well, who might have been, on farm for a long time and mixed up chemicals left, right and centre, but they're not comfortable in touching a computer whatsoever, or they touch it and it feels like it breaks. Some of the feedback in the chats here: can first responders see them in an emergency spill situation? Good one, Lee. Under harmonised legislation, states it has to be readily accessible to employees, including in their language, and to the emergency services personnel. So, Sachin, this is a conversation that we had the other day. I thought it relevant to bring that up with the group. I believe it's best practice to have hard copies available. And, preferably when we have a look at these sorts of things, ideally they should be laminated and all those sorts of things as well to protect against kind of any environmental damage. So is everyone comfortable? And Michael said that electronics not accessible at all times with internet access. Is everyone comfortable that we continue to insist upon hard copies? And we may just need to amend our wording in our next version 4. Do you think it would make it easier for businesses to comply if we're that explicit? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
At the same time, another something that
You might need to speak up. I've got a microphone down here.
Is and as the chemicals that goes by change quite often, there would be an expectation in that case to have that up to date all the time. And whether it's practical if we have 50, 100, I don't know. So that's another side of it. But yeah, appreciate any other feedback.
That is another. And can I have people type in the chat for me, please? Do you simply sample the SDSs, or do you go through every single chemical and every single SDS and check for validity and currency?
If they've got a folder, you'll flick through all of them. If you start seeing out of date, then you'd go more
Dig further.
But if the ones that I've found recently, they'll have a chemical register at the front with SDS issue dates and expiry, and you can use that as an indication to sample.
Yeah.
But also under the you have to get a list of all the chemicals.
Yes. So it's chemical register.
So
Mm.
Alice is right. You do tend to flick through and do some samplings, and if you start to see things,
Depends how quickly you can flick through
Yeah.
5 folders of, but I'd probably sample the ones that I'd actually seen on the site tour if I was doing a sampling.
And I think really that then speaks to, is there a quality management system in place to turn around and say, well, there is a register of chemicals that's kept up to date, and you can see if it's you know, a systemic issue as a problem, or if it's you know, they haven't checked those SDSs in 10 years.
Yeah, and that's what Seamus. Yeah. The really serious stuff, the organic phosphates and whatnot, paraquat or
Yeah, that's right. Thanks, everybody. Sample SDS only, pay attention to the chemicals they use. Normally the list is huge. Sample it. It's more about the system in place for managing expiry. Randomly sample, identify during site tours, verify from the chemical register. ChemReg manifest as a mandatory starting point. Yep. Sample SDSs to see if it matches the register and number of chemicals. Thanks, team. Very good. Cross-check with what's on site. Great. Second question around SDSs is that we know that they need to be within 5 years within currency. What happens if an SDS hasn't been reissued and it perhaps is 6 or 7 years old and there's not an available newly updated one from the manufacturer? Have you got thoughts around a process that's recommended from an auditing perspective? Does that once again come down to having the register or the manifest as to when you then last checked that the SDS was in date or available?
I think where I've encountered this in the past, I'll do a check myself. If I can find it and they've said to me, oh, we can't find it and I can find it, then that would be an issue. But I've also seen where they've done a check where I haven't been able to find it. They've done a check, say, 2 weeks ago before the audit, and they've made a note saying, attempted to contact manufacturer, no response as of yet. So something like that. But Glenn is saying that the site shouldn't use if they don't have an updated SDS. It'd be quite interesting to.
Okay.
Check if it has been requested.
Check if it's been requested. The site should not use it. Interesting. Okay. There were a couple of things, I think that sort of come to mind. Is it still a registered chemical as TFGA? Yeah, that's a good one.
But isn't it mean that when it's first supplied, so from a PCBU perspective, it's more around when it's first supplied to the site. If it's been supplied 7 years ago and they're still using the original SDS, then that would be an issue back to the supplier level because the suppliers are supposed to publish this documentation. So I would still take issue with the fact that there's not an SDS out there. I'd just fail to believe that because most of these chemical companies know the rules. So they're supposed to have these things revisioned and reviewed and printed on a regular basis.
Yep. No, valid point, Shane. Thank you. It's one that I've seen occasionally where in audit reports there's been non-conformances and the excuse from the grower is that, oh no, I checked and it's, I couldn't find one. It was from 7 years ago. I've been buying it forever. I've used it for the last 20 years. I'll continue to use it, but they don't have an up-to-date SDS. So, yeah, it comes back then to contacting potentially the manufacturer and I suppose doing some due diligence around whether there's been a change in actives, you know, how far they've gone to do that themselves. Does anyone have any questions? Verify from management, interviews and process if it was requested. If not supplied, it will still be added in the audit report as it was not available during the visit. Yeah, good one, Graf. Yep, that's right. That's right. Thank you. I think we've all kind of gotten a feel, and that's really what it was today. I mean, ideally, I would have loved to have tried to have completed this in full, and it would have allowed us to have some kind of standard of reporting, but it hasn't really panned out that way. It's probably taken a little longer than I anticipated. But nevertheless, I think everyone has a general rule of thumb how easy this system is going to be moving forward, and particularly beneficial where there are multi-sites incorporated in the one audit with one set of overarching policies and procedures. I will just stop sharing my screen at this stage. And Sachin, can you take back the control of that one for me? Got that?
Sure. Yes.
Yeah, thank you for with the slides. I can't see.
Thanks, Amanda. A quick question for program managers. When you check the audit reports from auditors, does anyone have any particular checklist, template, or a system that you follow to make sure that the report is adequate, complete, and up to the standard? What system do you follow to make sure that the audit report received is up to your expectations?
I work on the theory session. If I can't understand it, then no one else will. So, so basically, if there's issues there we have to address pre-submission, then we'll try and do it as quickly as we can once we've received the report. Usually it's more spell checks and grammatical errors, and then we fix those up. And then if there's anything that doesn't make sense, we perhaps need to reword phrases and information like that, just to make sure that people understand it. So the process is more around the fact is that it is clearly understandable and it's linked to either the standard and or the legislation that applies. So, but that's how we do it, but I can't talk for everyone else.
Sure. Thanks. Any other answers there? Some other audit platforms have an automatic incomplete check that you can do. Some have an automatic incomplete check. Oh, okay. Thanks for that, Joe. I will have a chat about that separately with you. Right. Another question I have, which is the last one for today, is when it comes to confidentiality and privacy, what sort of information do you cover in the entry meeting? Is there a standard wording that you expect auditors to notify the auditing? Is there a standard worded confidentiality/privacy statement?
So on the audit guide.
What?
So let them know who at our organisation will have access to the report, just the technical reviewer, and then at what point their registered buyers will have access to it. So that's kind of how I go about it.
Yeah, I think one thing that's a slight aside here, Sachin, is that some of the farmers and the labour hire agencies need to be educated about the Privacy Act. So, for example, you know, payroll data is not an individual's; it's the company's data. And also, you know, auditors fall under, I think it's Section 6 of the Act, as an approved secondary purpose. But very often people try to use the Privacy Act as an excuse not to provide information.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that message has got out. So it would be helpful if that was covered at some point about, you know, what is the implication.
Thanks. And also thanks, Shane, for that comment. Yes, it should be aligned with that. However, is it explicitly stated in a standard way so that all of us are on the same page when it comes to communicating that requirement? But thanks for those comments. I think I don't have any more questions. I'll open the floor. It's 2:00. Any questions, any suggestions, thoughts? Either you can put that on the chat or raise your hand and discuss your questions. If you want to discuss a few questions separately, individually with us, that's fine too. We are available even after this training this afternoon. Over to you.
Right, Sachin, Yuvraj here. So I was talking while I was mute, so sorry for that. So for the report review, what we have done is like we made our own sample report because a lot of reports were reviewed by Amanda in last few months. So we taken out the like points from there that what exactly Fair Farm wants, and then we made our own sample report, and we take it as a kind of a golden report when we check the report. So the one way of looking at it, and then also we're giving that format to auditors also that they should follow that's kind of wording in the report with the more and more detail.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you, Yuvraj.
And the secondly about the confidentiality, because payroll or the personal files, it's a private document of the worker. So if any worker don't want to share with the details with the auditor, we try not to take that record and we switch to another sample, or we take another worker for our review.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And I'll talk to you separately about the checklist that you're referring to with when you're checking the audit reports. Thank you.
Sure.
Any other comments?
Yeah, the only comment I was going to make, and we've had probably 2 serious cases where workers have refused to do interviews or provide information. It's actually because they've been threatened by management. So I think one of the things auditors need to be aware of is that if you're getting mass refusal to do interviews or allow access, then you're probably looking at a coaching violation or at least some sort of threat from management, because it is highly unusual. But 1 or 2 people doing it, fine. But if you're getting mass refusals, I would suggest that there's something deeply wrong going on.
Yeah.
Thanks I had one site where the entire workforce refused to be interviewed.
Right.
Because they were made aware there would be retaliation.
Right.
Yeah. I hope you raised a non-conformance for that.
We did, yes. It's actually denial of access to records in a perverse way.
Yeah. I see someone. Let me just check who it is. Colin.
I just wanted to say I've been to a few of these audit calibrations now, and I think this has been the most worthwhile. I think the content has been pitched at the right level, and I think the explanation at the start is probably the most in-depth and appropriate to an auditor so far. So thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Very kind of you. Yeah.
Well done. Thank you. Colin, I think you're referring to Sachin's part at the start. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Amanda. Okay, there's another question here. Which questions are marked as finding alert as yes in the question guidance? Which questions are marked as finding alert as yes in the question guidance?
Questions are marked as finding alert in
Yeah.
questions guidance. Right, okay. Certainly. So obviously, if you refer back to the Fair Farms rules and the audit guides, there are certain things that will be critical non-conformances that will determine whether a finding alert should be raised or not. They might be things like a child labour, forced and bonded labour, etc. And if you refer to that documentation, there is a list of when a finding alert should be raised and the time frame surrounding that. So an auditor must raise a finding alert with the auditing body. I think it's within 24 hours of the end of the audit day, and then that auditing body has 48 hours to raise that finding alert with Fair Farms. Fair Farms, as a scheme owner, then has an obligation to advise the registered buyers of such an alert, and then we monitor that course of corrective action throughout. So if you refer back to the audit guide documentation, you'll find that there are set parameters around there. But finding alerts, say, for example, an underpayment, that kind of thing, unless it's a massive systemic underpayment and a deliberate underpayment, then I would seek clarity from our paperwork there.
Does that answer your question, Gaurav? Go for it.
Yeah, Amanda, Gaurav this side. Just want to check when we put finding alert as yes in the audit report. Yeah. Does the guidance for the questions it says finding alert as no? So that's what my question was. Like, if we select yes, and the guidance doesn't say that the finding alert is saying as no, so how is it going to make the difference in when we are selecting as yes?
I see what you're saying. So, for example, I'm in question 1.6 on the audit checklist, and it's about a policy maintaining a cooperative and consultative approach. I'm trying to tick yes, and it works for me there. But I think what you're saying, Gaurav, that in some questions it's a no, and you can't change it to a yes.
Yes, that's what my question is.
So I think what the software architecture behind that is then that question isn't relevant to raise a finding alert against.
Okay.
Have you got an example question for me that I can have a look at in the same checklist?
I think you could.
Yeah, I'm looking at that.
Or if you select does not conform, it would automatically change it to a yes finding alert. For some,
yeah. But I think, we'll have to have a look at that. That's right, in behind the scenes. Maybe, Gaurav, we can pick that conversation up. You can show me through what you're meaning. You're obviously using that test environment for us.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, that'd be great. Perhaps I can have a side conversation with you about that after this.
No worries. Thanks, Amanda.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Colin, is that the raised hand from the previous comment, or you have more compliments for us?
I can keep complimenting you, but it wasn't the last one. Sorry.
Shame.
Thanks. There's a comment from Joe, always protect workers in alert situations.
That's right.
Noted.
I'm sure people perhaps have been in that situation. I don't know if anyone's been in a significant situation where they've had to advise authorities and that sort of thing. But Sachin did allude earlier to the fact that the Fair Work Ombudsman's starting to do a whole lot of interagency work. So they're starting to strengthen their communications and their in-field task force with Australian Border Force and Australian Federal Police. So they're kind of turning up as a bit of a tripartite arrangement on farms. So I think that we'll start to see a lot of, well, hopefully we don't see a lot more people running for the hills, but, it's only going to get worse before it gets better, right? It's our job to try and help the industry. But yes, Joe, protect the worker. Fear of retaliation.
Yeah. And just one more point, when you're out and about, if you have a particular trend for questions and feedback from people where we can create a content specific to horticulture, we would like to know, because we are creating a lot of content for different peak industry bodies in terms of social compliance, including some case studies. So if you have something interesting which can be created into a content for those publications, please let us know, because that will be used as a training and support mechanism. So thank you.
Can I just make one last point, please? And it's in regards to the non-audit pathway. We've had a couple of growers say, oh, wonderful, we don't have to undertake an audit anymore. The intention to design that pathway was never to have somebody go backwards. The intention was never to have somebody who was supplying the retailers have an ability to not be audited. So just, you may come across that in your travels where they've had an audit, or as an auditing body, you might be calling them to schedule an audit, and they say, no, I'm going to become a non-audit pathway member now. Well, if they are supplying into the supers, or they're supplying a wholesaler into the supers, they will have to remain in that status quo. The non-audit pathway was designed to capture smaller growers or those supplying the central markets and help them work their way up to an audit, not to backtrack. So just so you know, in case anyone sort of says to you, well, I'm not going to, I don't have to because Fair Farms has got a non-audit pathway. That is not the intent nor the design.
Yeah, thank you. Look, we are 11 minutes over time. Quickly going forward, we will send you a copy of the presentation as well as the edited recording. So if you have missed a part of this, you can go back and watch. And if you have any questions, let us know. As Amanda said, she'll be working on this checklist, and we'll get back to you in the next few weeks.
Well, any feedback on it? You know, as I said, it's going to be a work in progress, and it's nearly complete there. We're just adding a few more bits and bobs, but certainly once it's out and about, we can make amendments on the fly as we see fit. So we've got those key dates that we'd like to be able to meet with our targets. Thanks, everybody.
If there are no further questions or feedback, thank you for your time. Much appreciated. We'll include further details in the next newsletter.